Okay. Then I will call the meeting to order at 7 o'clock. The first item on the agenda are the minutes of September 20th, 2022. Is there a motion?
Move we adopt the minutes subject to modification.
Is there a second?
Second.
Page 1. Page 2. Page 3. Hearing no corrections then, all those in favor of approving the minutes of September 20th, 2022, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And one abstention, Jeff?
I abstain.
Okay. We move on to public comment. This is a time for anyone here in the room or online to speak about anything they wish to speak about. If you'd like to come to the table to introduce yourself and tell us what's on your mind.
I'm Carl Fowler from the Meadow Run neighborhood. I reside at 178 Meadow Run Road. I'm the former chairman of the Meadow Run board, but I'm speaking entirely on my own behalf tonight. I've been attending an extended series of meetings of the Development Review Board regarding new projects pending up in the area of the intersection of Route 2A and Mountain View. And I'm concerned with what I sense to be a bureaucratic refusal to consider the impact of the aggregate totality of those new neighborhoods on the livability of those of us who are already there. We have proposals coming from Snyder for over 300 units directly on the other side of Adams Brook. We have a potential nearly 80-unit project coming from the Trinity Baptist Church. We have the 15-unit Michaud project already underway. We have another development about half a mile further to the east on Mountain View. All of these are within the town plan, but their impact on traffic and their impact on mobility of people living in the area is something that the DRB doesn't want to discuss because it's, quote, the state's responsibility, or if it's a town road, they don't want to talk about it because there's Development Review Board, we can't talk about this. I need to appeal to the Select Board to find some forum by which we can look at the aggregate impact of the additional people coming into that part of our town and what they might do. I give you one example. The Meadow Run neighborhood currently is a cul-de-sac. But with the completion of the Michaud project between Mountain View and our neighborhood, Whitewater Circle will be opened up as a through street, and we will be an alternative way to get around the lights and the congestion at Mountain View and Route 2A. Now, as someone who frequently shortcuts the congestion at Taft Corners by cutting through the Zephyr neighborhood, I'm not going to be so hypocritical as to claim that I don't think people will be inclined to do that or should be prevented from doing it, but I do think that it's a real issue which needs to be addressed. Our neighborhood currently has characteristically about 20 to 25 mile per hour driving in it. We had a speed bump, but it was gradually leveled out by the town. The latest is there's going to be a light apparently in front of the Vermont State Employees Credit Union on Route 2A. Sounds like a good idea, except that already at rush hour, on an almost daily basis, traffic backs up from the intersection of 2A and Mountain View all the way to and past frequently the credit union. So if you put another traffic light in there, it's actually going to increase the problem, at least for those of us who live beyond that light, who might not be inclined to come into the new Snyder development. These are issues that I think need to be looked at collectively by the town before we permit the immediate movement from design to construction of so many new neighborhoods that are potentially impacting us. And if the Development Review Board won't listen to discussion of it, then I hope perhaps the town will, because this is a real problem. And whether or not 2A, for example, is a state highway, and therefore VTrans has authority over it, or whether or not it's an issue regarding one development in one neighborhood or another, the bottom line is it impacts the residents of this town, and gentlemen, you should be concerned about that, and should be in a position perhaps to help us with some sort of intervention. I personally would prefer to see a traffic circle, for example, rather than a traffic light. I'd like to see another one, in fact, probably up at 2A and Mountain View. But there have to be ways that we can address these issues in terms of mobility and fluidity. I know people in the Hamlet and in the Zephyr development are very concerned about traffic going into the new development by Adams Brook from the south. These are real issues, and if the DRB won't talk about them, I hope you will. Thank you.
Thanks for coming. Anyone else in the room who wishes to speak tonight? Anyone on Zoom who wishes to speak under public comment?
No one on Zoom, Terry.
All right. Then we'll move on to interviews and appointments. Tonight we have a candidate for the Old Brick Church trustees, and Sarah Fitz-Pratt. If you'd like to come to the table, the microphone doesn't amplify the voice, but it just records the voice. So we do have your application in front of us, and if you could just, for the benefit of those listening in, give us a brief description of your background and your interest in becoming a trustee of the Old Brick Church.
Sure. My name is Sarah Fitz-Pratt, and I've worked in Williston since 2002, and then bought a home in 2013. And I taught preschool for many years, and in 2014 I went to work with the state of Vermont. I work for the Child Development Division, so I work constantly with regulations and making sure everything is in place and doing investigations. And when I love living in Williston, and so when I saw that there was an opportunity to volunteer, I thought that would be a good fit. I'm used to helping maintain schedules, trainings, making decisions based on whatever regulations or handbooks may be made. I'm used to working in teams, so I just thought it would be a nice fit.
Good, thank you. Have you had a chance to talk to anyone on staff or on the committee?
No, I don't know anyone who's on staff for that. So.
That's fine. It's of course, it's a valuable asset to the town, and there are some folks who rent this, or organizations that rent it, and others who use it because they're part of the town. So anyway, any questions from the board for Sarah?
So what particularly about, I know we have a lot of volunteer openings right now, so if anybody else is watching, volunteer. But what particularly interested you about the Brick Church?
Well, first of all, I love the church. Actually, I remember I was living in an apartment on North Williston Road when it got struck by lightning back like in 2007, 2008. That was quite the storm that ripped on through. But I just like the history of it. I'm also good at organizing things, and I would like to see it be used if people want to use it for a concert. Or I know I was there about a year ago for a dog training class. We met one night in the bottom before we went to the school cafeteria. So it's just nice to see it be used. I haven't really, well, since COVID, it hasn't really been used much, I don't think. So it would be nice to be able to see it be used again if they need help organizing that and helping maintain some kind of schedule, then I can do that.
Other questions?
Well, those are going to be along the lines of my questions is, what do you know about the Old Brick Church? What do you like about it? What attracted you to this? And what do you see sort of your role or what you might advocate for as being a part of this committee?
Right. Well, I love history, and my father was a minister, and I grew up in all sorts of old churches. I grew up in southern Vermont, so there was multiple churches all bound together. And then when it comes to like my abilities, well, I think about promoting it more online, that there is a space. Since I know absolutely nothing about how it works, let me be very clear, I don't know anyone on this committee. So I don't know how people sign up to use it or what the perimeters are that they use it or if there's a fee, but I'm quick to learn all that stuff since I have to do that for my work constantly. Anyway, so if we need promoting or looking for more like concerts to occur or things for like local clubs, like, I don't know, the Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts. I don't know what the heating is over at the church, so I don't know if it's even really usable in the winter or what. There may be concerns with that. But I'd really like to see it be used in a safe way so that we don't hurt it in any way, but see it be used by the community more.
Okay.
So it's right in the middle of our little town here, so.
Okay. Normally I'd ask my conflict of interest question, but I can't really see.
No need to check that box.
I'd be curious to see what the answer would be.
She's secretly in a band and she's
Conflict,
going to be
no,
having all the
I'm no
context.
band. All I do is walk my dog around it sometimes.
Any further questions?
Just a comment. I worked at the Attorney General's office and was quite familiar with the Child Development Division. And if you can assess compliance with licenses for childcare, I can't think there's anything that volunteering for any aspect of town work is gonna.
I'm very familiar with zoning permits and fire safety and wastewater and
I was just thinking more of
all of those things.
The friction and emotion that goes into that. I think you'll do fine on any board that you want to be on. So
Okay.
welcome.
Assuming that we're going to appoint you tonight, the Williston Historical Society has a very good history of the old brick church. You might want to take a look at that online, and it shows it from before it was bought by the town and the things that have been done to it. And might even show the fire that happened to it a few years ago. So anyways, is there a motion to be made?
I'll move to appoint Sarah Fitzpratt to the Old Brick Church trustees for an unexpired 5-year term through June 30th, 2025.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Congratulations, we look forward to
Congrats.
having you
Thank
on
you
the
very
board.
much for stepping up.
Thanks.
Thank you for doing this.
Thank you.
Moving on to town value statements, Crystal Lee McSweeney, I believe, is calling in from out of state. Doesn't have capability to do it by Zoom, I think.
Yep, I see Crystalia. Crystalia, if you can, oh, there we go. Can you hear me, Crystalia? All right, we've got you.
We can hear you too. So thank you for taking time out for wherever you are. And we have your projected draft statement of shared value statement. So why don't you go ahead and tell us about that.
Yeah, so thank you for having me. My apologies that I wasn't able to be there in person or connect by Zoom. But I wanted to run the second draft by all of you. A few of us got back after the last meeting where you all shared your thoughts and feedback, and we made revisions to the value statements. And we're hoping to either receive further feedback, and if not, if you feel like they are all set to go, we would hope that we could get your approval to bring these value statements into the current values that we currently have in Williston and add these in as additions.
Thank you. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to look over these, and we're looking for some kind of feedback for Crystal Lee on this, whether they need redrafting or whether we're happy with them the way they are.
Basically happy with them the way they are. If I remember correctly from when we discussed them before, they were presented as separate ideas, and it was kind of that concept of which idea do we prefer, and at sometimes we actually punted and said we like both ideas, can you merge them together? So from what I can tell, I mean, this is a pretty good merging of the various concepts into a more cohesive 4-part statement.
Other comments?
Yeah, I really appreciate the efforts of Crystal Lee on your behalf and all the folks who worked on this, and that you all worked to really incorporate our feedback. You know, and that the daunting task of trying to whittle it down to one sentence was for each item was changed, because I don't think that it can be whittled down to one sentence. I think these are such complex ideas and values that they need more space.
Other comments?
It's certainly.
Very pleased with the way that you've wordsmithed all of these, and I think you've come up with, along with the other groups that you worked with, have come up with a good statement.
Yep. Good job,
I
Christine.
would
Thank
agree.
you.
Yep, I think it's captured for sure.
Chris Lee, I do have a question. I'll try to be brief. I guess my question is at what point should we be reevaluating this? Because our ideas about or how these shared values might, I don't know, be increased or changed over time might cause us to want to do that. And I'm just like to hear your thoughts on, should that be sort of an annual basis type of thing, or?
Yeah, my thoughts are, this is new and this is something that we're hopefully bringing on. And I think reviewing it on an annual basis really makes sense, especially as we continue to do further work on DEI and anti-racism within the community and within the municipality, and really looking at policies, procedures, and all of the things that we really want to be looking through these lenses with. So my recommendation would be for us to just relook at them on an annual basis, see if they still really match up with what's currently happening, if we need to make additions or if we need to kind of go back and wordsmith and reorganize. But my hope would be that we could look at these on an annual basis.
Okay, good, thank you.
Any other comments? I think we thank you very much for putting this together, and we look forward to having them come back to us in a different form sometime in the near future.
Hey, Terry,
Yeah, please.
speak to my thoughts on next steps here. Thanks to Crystal Lee and everyone who volunteered, all the good work to put these value statements together. What I would do next is package these into a new select board policy, a town values policy. We have some core values that have been on our website, including honesty and integrity, respect, effective service, innovation, safe and healthy work environment. I would take those and build off and include these values and draft something for the select board to look at, to then get the board's feedback and think what other values should we include if we're missing anything at that point. So that would, the board wants to move in that direction, I would do that exercise and probably get that back to you for the next meeting to continue discussion and having a policy document at that point to review.
Good.
Yeah,
Sounds good.
like that idea.
Thank you. We're moving right along. We can go then to if Sarah Reeves is available by Zoom at this point.
I don't see Sarah just yet. I'm expecting her any time now, but. She said she'd be on about 7:15, so I can keep an eye out. We could go. Potentially go to manager's report. Terry, I'm waiting for her.
Yeah, why don't we, that's a good idea. Let's do the manager's report on that one. Keep us on schedule.
So a few things in my report this evening, just an update on our community center scoping and library steering committee work. We have 10 applicants for the committee from the community, which is great. We have them scheduled to interview with the select board on the 18th and the 1st, so there'll be 5 folks interviewing at both of those meetings, and select board will be asked to select 4 of those folks to appoint to the committee. And then the board will also be thinking about which member of the board may want to serve on that committee, as it also includes a select board member, a library trustee, and a member of the Recreation and Parks Committee. Also pleased to announce we've selected a partner architectural firm, Black River Design, to work with the town on this project. They've assembled a great team with other sub-consultants specializing in community engagement, a library expert, and some engineering folks as well. So we're excited to be working with them. They'll support the committee. We'll also potentially be looking to start some community outreach this fall. We're going to think about that a little bit. Well, there's some opportunities while the weather's not so cold. So we're going to think about that a little bit, but also be very thoughtful and deliberative in the process here. That'll be very important. So excited to move forward with this project, and I think things will really start coming together in the next month or so with the committee as well. And we'll have the holiday season as well, but I think once we get into the new year, things will really pick up speed a bit on this project. So that's where we are as of today. And it's recognized the work on the North Williston Road culvert project was quite a large endeavor, and I want to thank our Public Works Department and contractor who assisted us. I know we had to close the roadway for a couple days there, but it was, we thought we may have up to a week of disruption, at least with one lane traffic, but they were able to get the work done ahead of schedule, which was very welcome. So that's all been wrapped up and in it's good shape now.
So Eric, just hopefully a quick question on that. I drive that road a lot. I would have fully expected they had to cut across the whole road, but they didn't. How'd they do that?
It's a good question. I know it was a section of pipe they replaced, and they had to relocate a gas line as well.
Okay, a section of it. Oh, and they had to,
First
okay.
step, but
Maybe that's the answer right there.
yeah, it might have been a side boring too.
I just assumed when Bruce was talking about a culvert that had collapsed, it meant the whole culvert had to go, but I guess not.
Yeah, we were worried it might be bigger, but yeah, thankfully
Okay.
it was. I think it was about a 70-foot section though, but it's a pretty large system that is attached there as well.
Okay.
Also, VLCT Town Fair is coming up this week. Greta, you're planning to go, and Jeff, were you planning to make it for the equity seminar on Friday?
Oops, did I miss that email?
It's okay.
Probably not. I don't think I'll be able to make it. I'll look, but that's gonna be tight for me. Shoot. You're gonna
Read it.
go?
I will be there, yep.
Yep, good. I'm glad we're represented.
Yeah.
And then the fire department's holding their annual, well, I haven't been able to have it in a couple of years, the open house this Saturday, and that will be from 9:30 to noon at the fire station. They'll be doing some, as part of now kicking off National Fire Prevention Week, there'll be some demos and several activities going at the fire station. So encouraging community members to stop by. And that's all I have for manager's reports. And I see you've got Sarah from CSWD, so I can connect Sarah now unless the board has any questions beforehand.
Any questions for Eric? No. All right, that's Sarah manager's report, and Sarah is ready.
Yep, I'll get her connected here.
Welcome,
Good evening.
Sarah.
Thank you.
So we're about to start the discussion on the Chittenden Solid Waste District Materials Recovery Facility, or MRF as it's commonly referred to. And Eric would just like to lead off the discussion, then we can switch right over to Sarah. Sure. And we have our town representative to the board, Kelton Bogaski, is here as well.
So the Chittenden Solid Waste District is holding a special meeting on November 8th for voters and member municipalities to consider a bond question to finance a new materials recovery facility, or MRF, to be located on Redmond Road here in Williston. Sarah Reeves is the executive director, and she's going to provide an overview for the select board this evening and members of the public on that bond question for their special meeting.
Thank you very much. And I want to, if I could share my screen, that would be great. Otherwise, I can certainly chat. Okay, let's go. There we go. Thank you. Okay. Okay. Only taking several hundred of these to be familiar with how to do this. So thank you again for your time. I do appreciate the opportunity to present what we're hoping to do and hoping to have voters approve on November 8th. And I think this board certainly is familiar with who we are for anyone who is attending maybe for the first time, tuning in. We are a municipal district created in 1987 by our member cities and towns, and to manage the solid waste that is generated by residents and businesses and visitors to Chittenden County. This is a general map of kind of where our facilities are located, and you can see there are several that are located right in the middle of the county, which is the main reason that we were really happy to be able to be working with the town of Williston for so many years as our host town community. And again, we have many facilities and services, and here we're going to talk about the MRF, or the Materials Recovery Facility. What is a MRF? That is where blue bin materials are brought to be sorted into different commodities and sent on to different markets. So currently, right now, and this is the plan going forward, CSWD owns the facility in Williston. We own the building and the land and the equipment. We do contract the services to Casella for daily operations. And we are the only publicly owned single stream MRF in Vermont. The other main MRF in Rutland is owned and operated by Casella. So why do we need a new MRF? Well, this one was, as this board may recall, built in 1993. It was built for 25,000 tons of material coming in the door, and we currently process about 47,000 tons. Where we're located on Avenue C is we're at the end of a road before the large curve down in the industrial park, and we're hemmed in. We can't expand out, we can't expand up. There's just the one baler, and we don't have any backup. So if that is the heartbeat of the facility, if that goes down, then we are down. And we have had that happen a couple of times, and we have had to either send material down to Rutland. I don't think we've had to send anything out of state, but I know the last time we had a shutdown, it was for about a week, and Rutland was able to accept the material. The new facility will give us much more flexibility, both redundancy and the ability to withstand any shutdowns. Again, talk about that flexibility. It's also not having flexibility in the type of material that we can accept. We cannot even think about accepting any new types of recycling. And as everyone knows, packaging has changed dramatically over the past 20 years, past 15 years. So this facility, the only things that we can take are the items that these folks, and there's generally 5 people who are on that container sorting line, and they are specifically trained to take a bottle, basically a plastic soda bottle or water bottle or an aluminum can or a laundry detergent jug, things like that. There's no way that they would be able to grab anything different, even made of those number 1, 2s, and 5s plastics. So it's extremely inefficient. We are probably one of the only MRFs in the country, Rutland is another one, that currently hand sorts containers. We are about 15 years to 20 years behind the times. We also, again, have very limited storage, and this is a photo I saw this is happening this week, and it was there last week when I was giving tours, where we store some of our material outside. This is not industry best practice. The new facility will allow us to have roughly 2.5 times the storage capacity to 3 times the storage capacity, all indoors as it should be. The reason this is an issue is, the weather, the sunlight, the rain degrades the value of these materials. Everything needs to be kept indoors. And this is a very rough conceptual design. We have not brought anything specific to the town yet, because we do not yet have the approval of voters to enter into long-term bonding. But this is essentially where we would be proposing to locate the new facility. So that is Redmond Road, and that is property that is owned by CSWD. And you can see the blue square represents the size of the current facility, which would fit completely and wholly within the new MRF. The new MRF on either end of that blue square, that's where the tip floor will be, the receiving bay, and then on the other end will be the storage bay, or the exporting bay. So both of those, again, are 2.5 to 3 times the size of the current tip floor and bale storage area. And if we needed to further expand, for some reason, if we were getting towards the maximum capacity of that MRF, which that would be a good problem to have, we do have room to expand on either direction, more on the side away from on Redmond Road than towards it, but there will be a little bit of room towards Redmond Road. And again, our current facility, the main technology is in our glass cleanup system, and I guess you would consider a magnet technology, but we really don't have anything close to modern technology. What we're seeing here, the orange machine, is called an optical sorter. And what this will do is it will read all of the material going underneath the machine on that belt. And by that point, by the time the material gets to this point, it's already been sorted out. These are for containers. So we're showing you a container one right now. On the paper line, the fiber line, we will also have these automatic optical sorters. So we'll have 3 of these on the fiber line, 3 of these on the container line, and then another optical sorter on what we're calling the last chance, or the residue line, to be able to grab anything that may have possibly slipped through any of these areas. And the material is run underneath, and you can program the equipment to be able to read certain plastic types. So again, as packaging changes, that's how we'll be able to be flexible and adaptable for the future. We can simply upgrade and update the software. Again, capacity benefits, more square footage means higher quality output, and it allows the material to be sorted better because it means that it has a longer run. And what that means is that it has less ability to have things be piled up and kind of heaped, and it's called having a nice even depth of material, so we can more easily sort through, and that the equipment and the people can do a better job. You really want your MRFs to be long. Ours is short and squat and all the way up to the rafters. Another key benefit is that in the new MRF, all of the processing will be indoors, and that is critical, particularly for the glass system. Bringing everything inside is really how modern MRFs do it, and we need to bring that to Vermont. Again, we like to talk about future proofing and building flexibility for the future. So this size MRF will allow us to process on a single shift upwards of 65 to 70,000 tons of material. That is how efficient these pieces of equipment are. So it will also, again, as I mentioned, allow us to adapt to the evolving packaging, things that are on the drawing board right now, and be able to keep moving more material from the waste stream and continue to preserve space in the landfill. As I just mentioned, everyone, I think, really understands the environmental benefits, and critically, it is that 70,000 tons of recycling every year that we're aiming for. We also would have the opportunity or the capacity to go to a second shift, but with this amount of capacity on a first shift, I don't think we would need to do that. So we have plenty of room, both for storage and material going outbound, 5 days of storage capacity on the inbound material in the event that something does happen to shut down. One of the questions we do receive is what happens to the folks who are working there now. And right now they are Casella employees, and we're actually understaffed. So our intention is that anyone who is currently working at that facility, if they want to work at the new facility, there's a job for them. We will have space for them, because what will happen is the folks who are hand sorting right now will transition into quality control. So the equipment, the optical sorters, can sort to between 92 and 95% efficiency. So there is still a role for humans to be able to do the QA after the equipment does its job. So everyone who wants to come over to the new MRF, we will have a spot for them, and it will end up creating at least 2 or 3 new higher skilled positions, and clearly you can see the difference in the working conditions themselves. There'll be taller ceilings, lighter, brighter, wider belts, better ventilation, just a much better scenario. How are we intending to receive the funding? The bulk of the funding will be from, again, this is all with the assumption that voters do authorize the borrowing. Coming from the Municipal Bond Bank, we are also eligible for a zero-interest municipal loan from the Closed Loop Fund, and that is an investment fund that is solely focused on recycling infrastructure. We also have cash on hand. We've been planning for this for a few years, and we have cash on hand that we can contribute to the project. Also, we are in line for a grant from the Recycling Partnership for upwards of $500,000. And the asterisk on the CSWD contribution, we are also going to apply for a grant from the EPA through their infrastructure grant program that was recently approved through Congress and signed into law. And those applications will hopefully be available within the next several weeks. And we should know if we have, we'll be receiving a grant hopefully by the end of the calendar year, if not early into the next calendar year. So we will be applying for the max. And how are we going to pay it back? So we'll take out the loan and the bond over the course of 25 years, and we will pay that back through operational revenue. And again, this is really critical that CSWD maintain ownership of this MRF. I think we really need the balance to have a municipal MRF and a private sector MRF in the state. And it is our aim and has been our modeling to keep our fees as low as possible, meaning that tipping fee or that fee that haulers pay when they bring materials to the MRF to be processed, so that we can continue to maintain stability in the recycling industry in Vermont. And again, as a municipality, we don't have that same pocket motive that the private sector does. So all we need to do is to make sure that we are paying for our daily operational costs, any capital contribution to the capital reserve to maintain the equipment and do replacements on a scheduled basis, and then to pay the debt service. And this is a special election. So we all received our votes from the Secretary of State, but you did not receive the CSWD ballot because that is a special election. So there are several ways that voters can request the ballot from if they wanted to vote on this initiative. You can still go to your My Voter page through the Secretary of State's office, and when you do that, you will see that the general election ballot box has been checked, and then you can then request the other separate special election ballots. You can go right to the town clerk's office and vote in person or pick up the ballot there. And obviously, if you vote in person, you will be handed all of the ballots that you need in order to cast your votes. And I will stop the share and would love to answer any questions you may have.
So one quick question regarding the ballot, since they're not going to be mailed, well, they will be mailed if people request them, but are we going to be collecting them for a central location to be counted?
So yes, so the CSWD charter requires our member towns to actually be the manager of our special elections. So just the normal, wherever people vote in Williston, that will be where they'll be able to vote on the CSWD special election.
Good. So other questions from the board regarding the funding and other stuff?
Hey, Sarah, guess what? I have a question or two. The first question I have is the project that's going to be funded through this ballot initiative, let's say. Do you anticipate that it, or do you anticipate that it will include improvements to Redmond Road due to the volume of traffic Redmond Road will see?
It's a great question, and we will be the same, or should be the same volume of traffic that obviously we're seeing in the industrial park, so it will just shift, as you are aware. The road itself is rated as a landfill road, so there shouldn't be any need to do any buffeting or buffering up of that road. There will be increased traffic, but it will only go to just past the Global Foundries entrance. So our entrance is being designed to, there's a house that we own across the street from that entrance, and that will be the new entrance to the MRF. So the trucks will go just that far down that road.
So it's fair to say that that will be, determined, decided during the permitting and design phase of this.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, okay. The next question, you went through the slide, and thank you for the presentation. The first thing I'm on the page where it's called funding sources. Oh, and the speaker in here, I'm having trouble hearing it. What did you call that EPA grant that you were anticipating applying for?
Yeah, so it has the acronym, I actually didn't say the acronym, but it is SWIFR, like the sweeper. It's Solid Waste Infrastructure for Recycling. Yeah.
Is twofold. One is, if you could just sort of discuss what's your strategy to make the amount that needs to be bonded as small as possible. And I'm sure you're good at that, your organization. And then the other question is when I look at the funding sources, I see the amount that's going to be, you're going to go to the bond bank for, which is 16 million, but I see the approval is for 22 million. So I'm trying to understand that difference.
Yes, thank you. So our Board of Commissioners authorized us to enter into long-term debt not to exceed $22 million. So what we're doing is we're trying to see how can we make sure that the impact of the longer term borrowing, meaning the bond, is, to your point, as low as possible. So through a combination of the 16 million from the bond bank, if we even need that much, if we get a grant, we'll be reducing that amount, and a shorter term, long-term borrowing from the closed loop fund in the amount of the loan, those two together count as the $22 million that our board has authorized indebtedness. So the closed loop fund loan would be no more than 5 years payback. And then the bond bank would be the 25-year payback.
So I misunderstood. The closed loop fund is not a funding mechanism per se, it's a loan program.
Correct.
Okay. And who's that operated by? Do you mind me asking?
It's operated by the closed loop partners, and it is an investment firm. It's funded by lots of very large companies that have a stake in recycling and improving recycling. They focused for a long time initially on getting carts into communities, recycling carts as opposed to bins. And now they're moving into infrastructure. So funding things like MRFs and other larger scale projects. And they're very excited. They haven't funded much at all in New England, nothing in Vermont. So they're very eager to be able to participate in this project, to be able to say that they've helped us improve recycling infrastructure in the state.
And I assume this goes without saying, the terms are quite good in terms, 5 years is relatively short, but the terms are good. Other terms.
Zero interest. Yeah, zero interest.
And my last question is the asterisk at the bottom of the funding sources where it says less EPA grant funding. I wasn't sure what that meant when it's tied to the district's contribution.
So that is, we're saying that if we don't get an EPA grant, CSWD will put in the balance. If we do get an EPA grant and it happens to be $3.5 million, then either CSWD does not have to put in cash, or we could reduce the total amount that is we need from the bond bank or from the closed loop fund to then lower that overall long-term indebtedness.
Okay. Yep. Okay. I get it. So in other words, the 3.5 million is what you anticipate will be the maximum the district will have to use as, I'm going to call it the local share.
Correct.
Versus, and that may be reduced by a grant. Okay, yeah, I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions and comments?
I don't have any questions, but I did share before the meeting, I happened to, get a targeted ad during like a game I was playing on my phone, waiting for school pickup, and I just wanted to applaud you on the excellent marketing for the vote.
Oh, good. Thank you very much. Glad you saw it.
There was one thing on the single sheet that we had that didn't get shown tonight, and that was the timeline for the project. And want to just talk briefly about that?
Sure. Yeah, so the timeline is we think doable, a little bit hopeful. A lot does obviously first primarily rests with the voters. Should this be approved, then we anticipate taking, basically most of next year working with the town on permitting and finalizing design. So it would be we're anticipating a full year of that. And then if all of that is approved, then we would start to do construction in late calendar 2023 into 2024. That would go through the spring and the summer into the fall. We would start the equipment installation in 2025. And the acceptance testing into the spring of 2025, and then start up commissioning training in late spring of 2025. So hopefully July 1, no later than that, in calendar 2025 would be our opening.
Nelson, anything to add to the comments tonight?
I guess Kelton's not here.
Yeah.
Caitlin McCamp is online, though. I guess Kelton had something come up.
Okay, good.
I don't know, Caitlin, do you have anything to add? If you raise your hand, if you have anything, I can unmute you. No, Caitlin doesn't have anything to add.
No, nothing? Okay. I think we're good for now. The MRF is well needed to be replaced and for efficiency and everything else. So thanks very much for your presentation.
Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
So we're running a little bit ahead of time. We can't start the public hearing until 8 o'clock. But we do have a couple of things under other business to take care of tonight. And Eric, perhaps you want to talk about the resolution for the TD Bank to put you on as a co-signer.
Yep, I left it for the board. I realized I said put it in your packet, but it's.
Do you need a
Oh, sure. It's we're just doing some administrative work here to make the manager a co-signer on our bank accounts, and the TD Bank requires a resolution from the board in order to do that. So I asked the board to consider adopting this resolution, and then we can submit it to the bank.
Any questions for Eric regarding this? I'd be looking for a motion then.
No move.
I was going to say, is there one in our manager's report?
No, like, the wording's not there.
We're lost.
We have a motion to approve it. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, we're taking care of that under other business, and we do have a new warning for the CUD to Eric, want to talk about that as well?
Yep, very minor change. It's a scheduling item. So we have the public information hearing scheduled for November the 1st, and we had scheduled it for 7:30, but I'm suggesting we change that time to 8 p.m. due to number of interviews the board will have for the steering committee that night to help our time estimate the best we can. So it's just a change from 7:30 to 8 p.m. for that on November the 1st, and we just suggest the motion for the board to approve the warning for the special election on November 8th as amended.
Okay.
Any questions or comments regarding that? I'd be looking for a motion also.
So moved.
We're good with half an hour.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the motion?
And I'll-
Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Any other business anybody wants to take up right now before we move to the public hearing?
Terry, I could also suggest the item following the form-based code, Matt Belanger could speak to the all hazards mitigation plan if you'd like to take that item up before the public hearing.
Yeah, since Matt has just arrived, that would be good to do.
Yeah.
So, item number 9, the Chitt County Multi-jurisdictional hazard mitigation plan.
Great. Thank you for having me. I've prepared a memo which was in your meeting packet this week related to the potential adoption by the Select Board of the 2022 Chitt County All Hazards Multi-Jurisdictional Hazard Mitigation Plan. This is a plan that is regional in nature but contains a section specific to Williston related to all manner of planning for dealing with various kinds of hazards that the town and the county and region might encounter, and identifies efforts that the member towns in the county have made in the last few years towards improving resiliency of their respective towns and region. This is a plan that's aligned with the Chitt County Regional Planning Commission's 2018 ECOS Plan mission, encompassing environment, community opportunity, and sustainability concerns, and is also aligned with priorities outlined in the Vermont Emergency Management 2018 State Hazard Mitigation Plan. Addressing hazard mitigation planning on a regional basis is a somewhat new thing for Williston. We were approached in 2018, asked if Williston wanted to join in with the other towns of the county to engage in this effort collectively to get this required document approved. We did, and what you have in front of you is the finished product, as well as what's called the Williston Annex. I will note with some apology that the Williston Annex has a big blank spot on the front that says, "Put town map here." I will communicate with the consultants about having an appropriate map of the town of Williston added to that before final adoption. What's in front of you is a motion to adopt the plan, and if you choose to do that, I can convey that back to the folks who prepared the plan, becomes part of the regionally adopted plan.
All questions for Matt?
My key question, Matt, is it appropriate to view this as an updating the last year's version of this? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Any big changes?
No real big changes, not to the Williston section. We updated whatever efforts had been made around flood resilience, things like that, looking at culvert analysis, various elements of our infrastructure and things like that. But the broad strategies haven't really changed in terms of planning for resiliency in Williston.
Okay. So a little bit of what I just heard is you don't anticipate any impact on the capital budget next year? This year, whatever year, the one coming up soon.
No, the priorities here are very much, stay the course, maintain infrastructure, monitor infrastructure for susceptibility to, again, primarily flood or, flash flood, stormwater hazards, changing weather. But the hazard plan itself talks about communities having to think about things like pandemics, for example, or internet service outages, data outages, and other things that may not have been as completely addressed in prior planning efforts.
Oh, interesting. Okay. And obviously you're good with it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions? And there is a motion suggested.
Move to adopt the 2022 Chittenden County Multi-Jurisdictional Hazard Mitigation Plan Resolution as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion?
Good job, thank you.
Thank you.
All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? So, we're now down to the public hearing on the development bylaw amendment to the form-based code, overlay district on 10 corners and townwide official map. And this is time for the public hearing. The Williston Selectboard will hold a second public hearing to receive comment on proposed changes to the existing Williston Unified Development Bylaw to create a form-based code overlay district on the Taft Corners area and establish an official map for the entire town pursuant to 24 VSA sections 44, 42, and the Williston Unified Development Bylaw. And it goes on further to say that the public hearing will take place on Tuesday, October 4th, 2022, at 8 p.m. in the Beckett McGuire Meeting Room at Williston Town Hall. So before we start the presentation, I would ask people in the room, by a show of hands, who wishes to speak tonight. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And those online, how many would wish to speak tonight?
Let's see, folks online, if you could just raise your virtual hand here and I'll count up. Got 2 hands raised right now, Terry, but a number of people listening, so there could be more that come up.
Okay. So at this point, before we open to a short presentation by Matt, I will limit the amount of time that each person has to no more than 3 minutes as you get to that point. So think about what you're going to say in 3 minutes time. And with that, I'll turn it over to, yes.
Excuse me, Terry. Peter Brooks, or Eric, I brought some copies of the letter and the draft. I wondered if people in the audience, if I could distribute them to people.
You can do that. Why don't you wait until your time to speak, and then you can present that to the folks in the audience.
Okay, when I'm going to speak.
Pardon me?
You want me to wait till I'm going to speak?
I think that would be helpful, yes.
Okay.
So Matt, a short presentation on what we're here to talk about tonight.
Thank you for having me, and I'll do my best to be brief. Working from the present moment, this is a second public hearing on the matter of considering the adoption of new zoning in Williston in the Taft Corners area. Development standards in the form of a form-based code that regulates the architectural design, site placement, and other aspects of new development, emphasizing, as you might imagine, the form of that building and site, where the building is placed on the site and how, and its shape and configuration in terms of architectural elements like doors, windows, balconies, etc. This is the second public hearing being held by the Select Board because following the Select Board's July 5th public hearing, there were 3 Select Board meetings with vigorous discussion on the version of the code that had been heard that night, and some direction to staff to prepare some changes to that proposed code as it had been originally transmitted to the Select Board and heard by them in July. The major changes that the Select Board asked staff to prepare for tonight's hearing were 2 boundary changes. One, removing the property on the northeast of Route 2A, mostly in the bounds of the proposed annex subdivision, but also some properties fronting along 2A from the code area. Secondly, removing some of the land proposed in the southwest corner of the form-based code area from the form-based code. This would be Taft Corners Park, Harvest Lane, lands adjacent to Walmart, Home Depot, etc., resetting the boundary in that area to a point 150 feet south of Marshall Avenue. Those were the 2 boundary changes. The other change the Select Board asked for was that the draft add an absolute limit on building height. Building height in the form-based code is primarily expressed in a combination of number of stories and maximum number of feet, but because it incentivized the provision of a pitched roof above that maximum story, the prior draft could have resulted in pitched roof points exceeding 110 feet in height. The Select Board, in consideration of some work we did looking at typical roof pitches on typical sized buildings in the code area, asked to add an 87-foot maximum height limit that would be applicable in all of the different form areas in the code. Backing up a little more, I do want to just review where we've been. The form-based code was prepared for consideration by the Select Board by the Planning Commission following an extensive public process throughout 2021. At the time that the Planning Commission transmitted their draft to the Planning Commission, we had had over 2,600 visits to the mytaftcorners.com website, 961 email subscriptions on mytaftcorners.com, 711 email subscriptions to our Planners Corner newsletter. We'd had 4 hours of in-person conversations with folks at Green Up Day back in May of 2021, 11 hours of citizen time collectively spent in community meetings, including a kickoff, Q&A, week-long design studio, and presentations and work in progress updates by our consultant team. We had over 74 survey comments, 338 comments on our map of Taft Corners, 129 participants at our online event, 70 participants in our kickoff, 36 participants in our design workshop on April 24th, 65 participants at our work in progress presentation on May 3rd of 2021. Remembering also that along with the form-based code and all of the standards in it, we are proposing a town-wide official map that would plan in a more detailed way for paths, new streets, and green spaces. We had a 15-member mobility committee that started its work in 2020 and worked through 2021 on elements of that official map throughout town, including in Taft Corners. It was by far the most extensive public outreach process I've been involved in as a planner in Williston, and was very rewarding to be part of all of those conversations we had with folks. And I thank the Planning Commission and consultant team for their hard work in making that happen. We had Planning Commission members out in the midst of COVID putting up posters about this project at workplaces throughout Taft Corners to try to solicit input from folks we might not be able to reach otherwise. There was a point where Emily Heyman and I went out and knocked on doors in Taft Corners to try to reach people we thought we weren't going to get through the town website. And all of that played into the vision plan that the Select Board reviewed a year ago in July, a little over a year ago. And the code in front of you is based really extensively on the feedback that was obtained through the development of that vision plan. And as you maybe have questions for me tonight, I may refer to the code. I may also refer to the roots of something in the code in the vision plan. Finally, I'll just end by saying that the code, first off, begins with a plan for a grid of streets in Taft Corners. It plans for those streets to have an interconnected network of bicycle and pedestrian facilities in an organized way that provides a continuous way for walkers and cyclists and drivers to get around Taft Corners. It's based on a grid of blocks that are around 400 feet in dimension, which is a human scale dimension that allows for walkability. It generally calls for buildings to be pulled up to the street and to present their architectural best face to the street. So the design requirements are really about what's going to happen up on the street. The code is very much asking that access and utilities and trash service and parking and all of those things happen behind the building and are accessed from an alley from a side street. Those are really critical elements to the form here. Lastly, the form standards call for a variety of different maximum and minimum building heights in an attempt to fit this form area in with the rest of town and be harmonious with itself. And those buildings, as I said, are required to be dressed in their architectural standards with minimum amounts of windows, minimum amounts of street-facing balconies, minimum amounts of doors on the street, in general providing for a development pattern that interacts with the public realm and becomes part of that public realm that's happening on the street. So you've all seen it, you've wrestled with the code, it's heavily illustrated. A lot of what I'm talking about has pictures in the code. That complete package is still here. The adjustments were the 2 boundary changes and the addition of an absolute maximum height, again, to prevent the very steepest roofs from being placed on the very biggest buildings under the code. I'm going to stop there. I'm sure you'll call me back up if you need clarification on something else, but I've certainly taken more than 3 of your minutes. Thank you.
So now we'll start the public hearing. For those of you who arrived late, I asked if a number of people are going to speak, and I'm limiting to each of you to 3 minutes, both you here in the room and on the on Zoom. So I'll call Mr. Martell. Why don't you come up to the table and introduce yourself, and you'll have 3 minutes.
That's not good. Hello, my name is David Martell. I live here in Williston, Vermont. And I wrote something up here, but we're down to 3 minutes. I'm going to cut this a little bit short. Obviously, I've been opposed of the zoning rules, the new zoning bylaws, particularly the building height. Those buildings that they're looking at right now at that 88.9 feet or 87 feet, whatever they call it, they're going to be twice the height of the buildings, current apartment buildings we have right now, Taft Corners. And I was kind of focused on that, and I kind of got, I kind of missed out on some important stuff. And one was this, that my focus got lost. And I was like, I didn't know how many apartment buildings they were actually looking at putting in Williston. How many can they actually fit in? And I understand there's going to be up to 100 apartment buildings, the 6th floor, and each one of those apartment buildings holds 60 apartments in it. So 100 apartment buildings at 60 apartments per building, that's 6,000 apartments we're going to have in Williston. 2 people per apartment, that's 12,000 people. 2 cars per apartment, because 2 cars go to work, that's 12,000 cars. On the average, each apartment, each household, let's say they have an average of 2 children. That's 12,000 children in our education system. Williston infrastructure cannot handle that type of influx. I mean, I don't know how long they plan on this going to take to work out, but that's a lot of people, that's a lot of cars. The streets aren't designed for it. I don't know if even the sewer and the water can handle it, to be honest with you. It's a huge amount of people in this area. The infrastructure just can't handle it. Another thing, I compared it to the existing buildings in Finney Crossing right now. The existing buildings there have 59 apartments compared to the 60 of the new apartment buildings, which are six stories compared to the 3 stories they have right now in Finney Crossing. The difference is the base size of it. So the ones in Finney Crossing are shorter and wider, and the new ones they're proposing are taller and narrower, but it's the same amount of apartment buildings. So what you're doing is just cramming in a lot more apartment buildings that are taller, 6 floors, which is going to double the apartment space in the area. So, I mean, I just don't agree with that. I think it's just too much. The other thing I'd like to talk about is on the other side. Okay, the other thing I find that I hear all the time is people believe that these apartment buildings are going to somehow prevent the development of open property here in Williston. And that's not true. If there's people that own property in Williston and they want to sell that land for development, they can do that. Building these apartment buildings is not going to prevent the development of other land in Williston. Also, I hear a lot is going to provide more affordable housing. And right now, there are no rules, there's no regulations, there's no management, there's nothing in place to manage affordable housing in Williston. It's just a word. It doesn't mean anything. Until there's a system or a policy or a procedure, a management, a department that is going to manage, and a written contract or an agreement with the builders or the landlords of the building owners that say, each one of these buildings, you're going to get 5% of the apartments is going to be considered affordable housing. And what is the affordable rate? Is it $1,200? Is it $1,800? Is it $2,000? Who knows what it's going to be?
Your time is up.
Okay, can I do one last thing?
Yep.
All right, cool. All right, so I guess the other thing is, I think this is pretty important. We have a lot of people, both sides, want it, don't want it. I think this is something that the select board should commit to putting to a new zoning regulations to a town-wide vote at town meeting day. And I guess I asked the town member, the select board, is that something you folks would consider doing? I mean, we have a lot of people on both sides, want it, don't want it. And I think it should be to do a vote and let the town people actually make that decision.
Thank you.
You had to get any take
I'm
on
not
that?
sure that the law will allow us to do that.
Can I say one more thing, quick thing?
Pardon me?
Can I say one more quick thing?
No.
Oh, come on, man. All right. I have some extra minutes here.
Someone else on this side who wishes to speak? I saw a lot of hands, yes.
Again, I'm Carl Fowler from 178 Meadow Run Road. I think the revisions proposed have improved this proposal, and in that respect, I am pleased with it. That said, I think this is unfortunately exempting the acreage of the proposed Snyder development. And if that decision is going to be made to exempt one very large development, which contains 300 units and is really consequential in terms of impact, there should at least be a pause to try to see if the mitigations for that neighborhood can be made effective without the rules for form-based development. And that reflects traffic flow, but it also reflects open space. I do not disagree, however, that in general, cluster development is desirable if we can accompany it by a requirement for open land. And there's the key. How do you require the open land requirement? And I do think the plan is relatively silent on that and probably needs, regrettably, yet more work before it's at adoption. But I regret the removal of the land that would accommodate the Snyder development. It was a pretty concise and effective area before. The final irony, of course, is that we have so developed already so much of the Taft Corners neighborhood that there is going to be relatively less impact, I think, than people may imagine on this. And that doesn't say shouldn't do it, but it does say perhaps that the parameters of this plan should be expanded, perhaps to go to Mountain View, to go further towards the historic village and not be trapped just at Taft Corners. Thank you.
Thank you. Someone else on this side? Yes.
Thank you. My name's Kyle Sal. I live here at Turtle Pond in Williston. I just wanted to voice my support for the select board voting in favor of the form-based code. I think growth is a reality. Williston's lucky to have a growth problem, but it's a problem nonetheless. In order to plan for an effective use of space that benefits the people that live in Williston, the Planning Commission and planning staff and community worked very hard to develop this plan. A number of revisions have taken place. The buildings will get built either way, as people have mentioned. There's really no stopping it, and I think the form-based code is one of the best options we have to manage the growth for the future in a sustainable way that benefits, that has public benefit. I also wanted to thank the Planning Commission and the town planning staff for all the hard work that they did on this project. Thank you.
Someone else? Yes.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Scary. I speak for my husband, Jerry Greenfield, also. I agree with Mr. Martell about this huge scope of this project for our little town. Just the fact that there's a potential for that many huge buildings, it just doesn't seem like it's in any kind of scale for the town since I've lived here, which is many, many, many years. It was 4,000 people, I think, when I came here. I know there's going to be development. We understand that. We're near Burlington. We're on an interstate exit and the entrance. So it's going to happen, but it really seems like it's massively out of scale. Potentially, I think about, I don't have a clear sense of what this would do to people's taxes, and I think of all the retired people in this town who are on fixed incomes. My husband and I can afford to pay taxes. Some people really can't, and I just feel like this is out of scale and should be reconsidered.
Thank you. Go to this side of the room. Mr. Brooks, why don't you pass out your information, and then your time will start when you sit at the table. Welcome.
Thank you. Peter Brooks. We live off of the old creamery. We built our house 35 years ago. So, of course, we've seen a lot of change in Williston. As a previous gentleman said, I want to thank you for the incredible amount of work that's been involved in this. We really appreciate all the effort you've put in. And we appreciate that you have voted to lower the maximum height to 87 feet. So we've been distributing this letter to the select board members. As you'll see in the letter, as you folks know, we are still very concerned about the 87-foot maximum height, that this is very out of scale with the Taps Corners area and not at all what the residents of Williston want for our town. This 87-foot height is significantly more than 2 times the height of the existing 3-story buildings with flat roofs that are behind LL Bean and Healthy Living. Is there any way we can kind of, no? Okay, thank you. We strongly feel that the new construction in the Taps Corners area should be subject to the current height regulations and be in proportion with the existing structures and more in keeping with what Williston residents want for our town. So we have 90 signatures on our letter, and I think it's important to note that these people are not outliers. Our good friend, John Shook, lives in the village and has signed a letter. On Sunday, he took it around to his neighborhood. He talked to 19 people about this question of the height of these buildings. And all 19 people signed a letter. And that was reassuring to me. I felt quite certain that this would not be what people wanted, but it was reassuring to me that out of 19 people said no. They said, no, we oppose this. So I think a big takeaway from this is that a strong majority of the people in Williston would be opposed to allowing these buildings of 87 feet to be built at Taps Corners. John talked to 19 people and every single one signed the letter. So, thank you for your time.
Anyone else on this side of the room who wishes to speak? Lady in the back.
My name is Roberta Tracy. From 454 St. George Road. It feels like Williston is at another critical junction. For a period of time, I left Vermont and moved to Chicago, go figure. And in my north side neighborhood, it was filled with 87-foot tall, 8-story buildings, and they were appropriate for an urban environment. But I ask, are buildings this size really appropriate for a suburban and rural community like Williston? Buildings this tall will radically change the character of our town. They co-opt viewscapes and dramatically alter roofscapes. Most importantly, this is permitted, it will signal that Williston is open to becoming an urban community. And by extension, the zoning changes will increase the already incredible pressure felt by landowners such as myself and my husband to sell their property for development. Vermont has to be smarter than this. We need to think out of the box if we are going to provide affordable housing that makes sense for the character of our state. Buildings like the one proposed are not intended for subsidized or low income or even much needed affordable housing. buildings that are 87 feet tall are intended for people of means. They are willing to pay and can afford to pay for the viewscapes. And I wonder what the message is that the select board wants to send. And what do you, the select board, see as the future character of our town? And have you truly considered some of the unintended consequences that could arise from approving such a zoning change? And is this what the precedent you want to set for the character of our town and the message you want to give for the future of our town? Obviously, I appreciate the work that you have done. It has been, I know, a journey for you. But I'm not sure that this is the solution to the housing problems we face. And I completely do not agree that it is at all what Williston needs or wants. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Jay Petrillo, Williston resident. Just out of curiosity, what do you consider affordable housing? How much rent? What type of price for a house?
I think the Department of Planning can answer that better than we can.
Well, I'm just wondering, is the figure realistically driven or market driven? If you go to any app, the median household income in Vermont is $63K. That's household income. Based on this, with the current mortgage rate and a credit score of 700, current mortgage rate for 30-year fixed is 7.2%. So a purchase price 10,000 down, you're looking at houses for 195K. Okay, that's not going to happen. Then if you look at rent calculator, the average median income for Chitt County is $40K for a single individual. That person cannot afford any apartment currently available right now in Williston. So, you want to build taller? Sure, build taller. But what kind of guarantees can you offer that is going to be affordable housing for real people to afford to live there based on a median income? On top of that, if you build taller, how many complexes? And for those of you who've been to any city, there's something called a canyon effect. When you walk between buildings on a sunny day, one side of the street will be in shade, depending where the sun is. Another side of the street will be sunny. So who gets the sunny side of the street? And there's a jazz song called that. So, again, being realistic here, and I've seen many phases of building in Williston. And I've seen a lot of unfulfilled promises of various projects being built. And it doesn't take rocket science to figure out the more residential areas you have, the more you're going to need more infrastructure, as Mr. Martell pointed out, and also the need for schools. So if we're willing to go that route, come up with a better plan. That's it.
Thank you. Move to this side of the room, and we'll lady, you're over here.
Hi, Cindy Provost. I live right on Williston Road, not half a mile from this project. And I asked people that agree with this project, I ask any of them, where do they live? Do they live where all this traffic and congestion is? Do they live where the population is supposed to be increased by thousands? The traffic, the impact, the everything that comes with that, the crime, all of it. Do they live there? All of the people that think this is such a great project, so it'll keep this sprawl from where they live, but yet the people that live close to this, they live in it, like I do. It's not right. These buildings on this height belong in a city, not even Burlington. Do we want Williston to be a Burlington? I don't. I go down there and there's drugs dealing on the corner, behind the buildings where no one can see because they're so tall, in the alleys. Do we want that for Williston? I feel like that's what we're looking at. Buildings do not need to be that high. There's none of the buildings around here, they should stay with the existing zoning. This should not be exempt from that. And it can be done in a way that does not impact the way our town looks and feels and the outlying people that live close to this. The traffic is gonna be undeniably enormous. You've built all these buildings in Maple Tree Place and in Chelsea Place, and Finney Crossing, so they're close to the road. Where else are the roads gonna widen to when the traffic is so much after the term of this whole project is done? And you have thousands and thousands of more people here that are gonna impact the center of our town. Our town, it's a town, not a city. And people that have lived here most of their lives should not have to have this thrown in their face. It's just not okay, especially for the people that live close. And the people that, like I said, live far out, just, oh yeah, they'll keep it from us. Well, sorry, it shouldn't be that way. And I do respect all the time that's gone into this, but I don't feel like it's been, some of it I don't feel like it's been genuine. Because when you look at what they did in Chelsea Place and Finney Crossing, how badly that looks in a lot of respects, how it's not cohesive, how a lot of things aren't, and now you're trying to make up for it on the other side of the road, I feel like, or even over. I just feel like this is not right. It should be left to the town people, and there shouldn't be a law against that either. I'm sorry, but I don't get that. But be respectful to what's around it instead of making it look like a Williston city, not a Williston town. And be respectful of the people that live close to where all this traffic is going to be and the enormous amount of people that are going to be here. And as Mr. Martell did say, the infrastructure does not allow for this at all. I've had numerous people person on the historical board, other places that say, a lot of people don't understand the impact of how many people you're saying that this is going to allow to be in the center of our Williston.
Time's up.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Anyone else from the side? Yes. Sheba?
Sure. Hi, Chapin Kaner and I'm a member of the Planning Commission. And I just wanted to share that the Planning Commission, as we put in a letter to you, is working on affordable housing as a separate project called inclusionary zoning because it's so important. And then we thought we would risk not doing a good job of that if we combined that with the Taft Corner. So I want to make sure people know that we recognize and appreciate that. The other thing is that on height, we're talking about 87 feet of a peaked roof that's not of living space. And the Planning Commission took a tour, members of us took a tour with the consultant and with staff members, and we looked at buildings around Chittenden County, and we tried to figure out what would make sense. And so our vision is not the vision that I'm hearing people express. And I heard someone say there could be 8 stories and 87 feet, and that's what I would have thought. But if you put a big peaked roof on top of something, it could be 87 feet and not appear that high from the street where you can't see the roof, et cetera, et cetera. So I almost feel as though the fact that we are allowing pitched roofs and incentivizing them is creating a misconception about height and a problem. And I just want to say this is my personal opinion, but I think it's also probably the Planning Commission's, that the reason why we entered this project was because people were unhappy with the way development was going at Taft Corners. They didn't like that new hotel. They didn't like the apartment buildings at Finney Crossing. They didn't like that every developer's ideas had sort of their own look and feel, and we didn't have a place called Taft Corners. And so, we had Finney Crossing and Maple Tree Place, et cetera. We didn't have Taft Corners. And so this is intended as a long-term sort of design It's not a project, it's not a plan to do any particular number of houses, it's to say when houses are built, when residential is built, here's the plan that it has to follow. And that actually makes it easier for the developer as well as for the town, because you don't have to review every one in detail because it's laid out as a form-based code. Now, we may have gotten some things wrong. I'm sure we did. And we made revisions right up till the last minute. And you've made some revisions since. And what I would say is that if you agree that we need to make a change in how development is going, we need to get this on the books. And then if we want to revisit building height, we should do that as one of our first things to look at for amendment. Because a lot of people I respect greatly are having a problem with that. And I think if they had seen what I saw in developing it, we would be able to reach a compromise, and it might be less than what's in the code now, but I feel like we need the code. That's all I want to say. And just be aware we as a planning commission are trying to look 50 years out for the town.
Thank you. I think we'll go to Zoom now, if there are folks there who wish to speak.
Yep, folks on Zoom, I see you with your hand raised. What I'll do is I'll unmute you, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak to the board. So first I see Deborah has your hand raised. I'll connect you right now.
Hi, can you hear me? Okay, thank you. My name is Deborah Muccio, and I'll be reading a letter on Marcy Cass's behalf. Marcy and I are both on Sustainable Williston together, and I support her letter as well. She is home observing Yom Kippur this evening and couldn't attend this meeting. So here's the letter, which I believe she also has submitted. Dear Select Board, it is my sincere wish that you adopt the form-based code for Williston's town plan this evening. The refinements that remain unresolved tonight can be worked on after the plan is adopted. If the plan is not adopted tonight, I fear that in effect, developers will be given an extension to develop without any of the constraints of the new plan. The Planning and Zoning Department, a nationally known planning consultant and his team, the Planning Commission, and lots of citizens like me attended many meetings and came up with a pretty good plan. This plan has the potential to reinvigorate Williston and be a win-win for developers, people who live here, and people who'd like to live here. It also can help preserve our wild open spaces and keep them from being filled up with housing developments. Let's do this. Thank you, Marcy Cass. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Next, Lisa Braden Harder. Lisa, I'm going to connect you right now. And you'll just need to unmute, Lisa.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me now? Great, thanks. So I also would like to thank the staff and the select board for their careful consideration of this difficult but important task. I'm committed to affordable housing conversation in Williston because we have a truly unique resource. We have undeveloped land near jobs and public transportation. That is rare in Vermont. Our zoning, like the discussion today, is where we can make real impact on the inclusion and equity gaps that became so clear during COVID. And also in light of the value statement that you discussed earlier this evening with Krista Lee about the values that we have as a community, I personally see the biggest impact that Williston can make in terms of DEI in zoning. So if 97% of our retail workers and most of our town workers and most of our teachers must leave and live elsewhere because of our housing prices, we're not an inclusive community and never will be. We are creating a town for the top 20% of Vermonters and for them alone. In these zoning discussions, we make choices that reflect our values. I heard strong support for affordable housing during the last community feedback session, where I counted about 75% of the commenters brought it up, and more support on Front Porch Forum. So regarding the immediate discussion for today, I think that the high compromise is a good response to citizen input. I don't share the concern that every view must be saved above all other considerations in our town, but I did see the significant concern from the community. That said, the community concern for affordable housing has also come out in all of these discussions. And I think it's been left out of this compromise, even as developers that are being handed the potential for higher profits. So the lack of consideration for affordable housing during this compromise period is a disappointment to me. Thank you very much.
Next, Jeff online, I see you have your hand raised. I'll unmute you right now.
Can you guys hear me? Okay, it might be a little noisy. I'm in a U-Haul delivering a bunch of goods to Southwest Florida right now. So if you hear the noise, I'm in a U-Haul, but I'm on a hands-free. So bear with me. So everyone that doesn't know me, I own a property on Taft Corners, and I also own a company called Poly, one of the largest employers in Williston. And I want to commend the
Oh, there you are.
Sorry about that. To develop, can you hear me? Yeah, so I got a call on the work done to set some guidelines around development and also to develop a structure to allow for the building of housing. Now, it may not be affordable housing, potentially, but I will tell you that supply demand is a economic thing that works quite well. And when you introduce housing, and landlords eventually have to compete for the business of a tenant because there's enough housing, it becomes affordable. And Vermont has a problem, and we have a problem attracting employees, especially young employees, to the state of Vermont. This also develops an area that's walkable, where there's a mixture of business and living. That has worked well. I don't live in Williston. I own a building there, and that's where our company is. But in South Burlington, in the city center, I've been very impressed with what developers have done with the form-based code. The buildings are very, very attractive looking and integrated quite nicely. And this will, I think some people said they're concerned about how everything fits in. This is how you get things to fit together and standardize the look and feel of an area. I think Williston is sitting on an opportunity to do big things. It's got great resources. It's a great place for employers like Poly to do business. And I am fully supportive of the changes in the form-based code. And I think it will develop over time for the statements. But I think a great first step is adopting it and then working together into the future to change it as needed. Thank you.
Sorry, went online, Terry.
That's it? Anyone else on this side of the room? This gentleman here, then, like you.
My name is Bruce Roy, and I'm a 20-year resident of Williston. And full disclosure, I'm also running for the House of Representatives representing Williston. I want everybody to know that as I speak. I am one of the folks who signed the letter that Mr. Cook presented. In my course of campaigning, I'm learning from a lot of people that they don't feel their voices are being heard, whether it's at the town level or at the state level. So what I'm going to ask is that the select board pause, don't go forward with this thing as a select board measure, but listen to what people are saying, folks like Mr. Martell, and because it has far-reaching consequences, what you're going through right now, changing this code and what it's going to do across the street, where the plan is at the crossing there, I suggest you put it to the vote of the people. The people who haven't been heard, they are not being listened to, they're not being reacted to, and I think the best solution for this town is let the people decide about this thing that has the most consequences. Thanks.
Thank you. I don't have anything written this time.
It's all right.
My name is Joyce Austin, and I've lived in Williston for 35 years. And I just want to say, I don't question the work the Planning Commission has done. I really don't. I admire your knowledge. You've informed me a lot. The last meeting, I was really impressed. He knows what he's doing, and he knows how to build, I'm sure. But again, I think 88 or 87 feet, I don't even know what we're playing with here, but is just too high for our town. I'd like you to keep the maximum height that was on the form-based code of 64 feet. And I think with 64 feet, you can even add a peaked roof. And I know that the Planning Commission was listening to the community because the buildings that were built, a lot of people were disappointed with. And my hopes is that this form-based code will allow us to have really unique buildings and a unique space to our town. I don't know what else to say other than I fought the mall and the mall won. And they told us before that was built that there would be no increase in taxes, we wouldn't need any more police officers, we wouldn't need a new school. And they must have thought we were, I don't know, dumb, because all those things were needed. We have 2 schools now, and who knows what this will do to the high school. So I'd really like you to keep the height that the form-based code has in place, and that's it. And again, thank you for the time to talk. Thank you for the work of the Planning Commission, and I'm so glad everybody's here. I was here all by myself last time.
Anyone else on this side of it? Yes.
Hello, my name is Dan Boomhauer. We live at 4545 St. George Road here in Williston. I really appreciate all the work you folks have done. Thank you for bringing all this in and the transparency and the open process. It's been quite incredible and I appreciate it. When our family gave way and allowed Marshall Avenue to go through the farm on the corner of Brunel Road and where Marshall Avenue is now, we had no idea that we'd be talking in a few years about 87-foot housing going in that same pasture. But here we are, and so I'm trying to wrap my mind around time and change, and one of the things that concerns me with what happens with form-based zoning in this way is that it's going to be grandfathered into the future. Whatever gets chosen can happen, and when people do build those things, it's not going to be like 5 year later, whatever, people are going to be able to say, oh, I hate it, I can't stand it, why did we allow this to happen? What happens now goes on for forever. So we have to think in terms of that and try to come up with ways that we can carefully and slowly bring this process in and make sure that it's all been considered. And I appreciate the openness that has been going into these considerations. I would like to see, the cluster development. It'll help us with our property where the logging operation is going on St. George Road. I would really like to see it connected to that low-income affordable housing so that it is interconnected. It is not a separate document that comes up later that may or may not get connected to what has already been built and is permanently there for forever. So, and I would also really appreciate it if we could somehow connect the other aspect of this town to what's going to happen there, because if this cluster development and this form-based zoning is going to happen, it would be really, really fantastic if the zoning also connected it so that we could have more incentives to keep our property open, so that our 180 acres is not under pressure to be developed because it is now so much closer to this huge area that is being put into 87-foot houses. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on the right-hand side that wants to speak tonight? How about on the left-hand side? Anybody who hasn't spoken yet that wishes to speak? Yes.
Hi, everyone. I'm Martha Chevalier, South Brownell Road. Grew up under the auspice of the Pyramid Mall coming. So all I have to say is, it grieves me when I drive, and I do appreciate all the work everyone's done, but it grieves me as I drive through Essex and I see all these huge buildings that dwarf the land. I drive through Winooski now, and it's the same thing. There's no concept of good land use, and everything feels crowded. And to me, this is probably dramatic, but is it a Trojan horse? Where are we going? Where is this going to take us? And yeah, I'm a Vermonter, so it matters. I think Williston is a lovely farming community. I know growth and change is inevitable, but it would be nice to keep Thomas Chitt in mind as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on this side of the room? Yes.
Sure, I'll give my time to Mr. Martell. There you go.
All right.
Okay. You're gonna have mine too, go for 6.
No, only one.
Sure. All right. Once again, Dave Martell. So I guess, to make it quick, I guess, I know the zoning board gentleman has done a lot of work on this. And I guess there was a couple things that just kind of bothered me. Like right from the get-go, when I went to their website, I looked at the PDF documents, which are very impressive about the new codes and all the designs, all the measurements. It was very well done. But I also made comments to everybody that all the buildings in there were all 3-story buildings. None of them were 6-story buildings or 5 stories with an attic. So they talked about, they had a building drawing with 3 stories with a roof, and they go 87 feet to the top of the 5th floor. Visually, when everybody looks at that documentation, extremely misleading, because I'm looking at it and say, hey, that looks great. Well, that's not an 87 building, 87 foot or whatever it was to the top of the 5th floor, what the original measurement was. And then you had the 1412 pitch, we could add another 50 foot to the roof, would make it like 120 to 130 foot roof building, overall height. So I thought that was very misleading and just very deceiving, and that really kind of bothered me. And I made plenty of comments about having that changed, but it never got changed. Now, he also mentioned that all the work, the surveys, 2,000 people going to the website. I've been to the town website at least 100 times, probably even more within the past few months. Going to their website doesn't mean you're for or against. Just means I went to the website. I'm against it. I'm not against everything in it. Don't get me wrong. There's lots of things in the 4-page codes which I do like. One of the things I didn't like, which is going to add a lot of cost for the contractors, the building owner, is all the buildings have to be, the roofs have to be fitted and rigged and designed for solar panels. Even if you're not going to put solar panels. So if you've got a massive building, 1412 pitch, like the original design was, you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars to put that infrastructure into the roof to be ready to go for solar panels. You're going to plug them in, they're ready to go. That's a huge added cost to the building. So there are things there that I didn't care for. The survey information, to be honest with you, hey, we did 270 surveys. What were they for? Against? Nobody knows. I had 300 people send me an email. Were they for or against? Nobody knows. So they're saying there's a lot of data out there, and I'm sure they went out and did some legwork. I didn't know about any of this until I heard somebody say, hey, they want to put in these, 140 foot, no, they told me the building, they did the research, did the math calculation, 130 foot buildings. And that's when I started getting involved with it. But to be honest with you, if it wasn't for that, I would have never known. I was lazy. I never went to the town meetings. I never got involved, and now I am. I'm getting more involved in it. But I think the data that they're presenting is just kind of misleading. You say 200 people, that doesn't mean anything. For or against, it doesn't mean anything. And if I do believe correctly, when they first started the project, they actually had a meeting with the major developers in town and asked them for their opinion. And they told them there was lots of issues with this that were not good. It's going to add cost. It didn't have flexibility, which adds cost to the projects. So I think, yes, there's good things in their new zoning, form-based codes. There's some things that are not good in it. I think we really need to have more people get involved in it, reevaluate it, make a decision. I don't think passing it now and saying, hey, we'll come back later on and fix that. That's not going to work because it never happens. They're just going to run with it. So I think we need to stop, reevaluate it, get more people involved in it. And like Bruce Roy said, and I said earlier, put it to a town vote. Let's get people involved. Let's do the research. Let's do the planning. Let's bring something to the town that the people really want. The building developer said that in the beginning. They liked the old way of doing it, and the reason they liked it is because they got to interact with the select board. And they worked with people. They didn't actually nod his head. Okay, so they never interacted, but I was told they did. So basically, there's got to be a way that everybody gets involved and helps make these decisions. Everybody I've talked to, nobody wants to see an 87-foot building in Williston. And they definitely don't want to see 100 apartment buildings. Want to get 6 minutes? Give me your suit.
You've had more than 4.
Thanks a lot. That's killing me, man.
So is there anyone on Zoom who wishes to make any public comment?
Oh, one more person.
Okay.
Denise, I'm going to connect you right now. You'll just need to unmute, Denise.
Okay. Hi, I'm actually not Denise. I'm actually Nancy Brooks. I'm actually Peter Brooks's wife, and I hope that my 3 minutes are okay, even though he's spoken. I want to say that I know that a lot of work was done on this during 2020 and 2021, but I think we have to realize that that was during the pandemic and people really weren't paying attention. You know, people were worried about getting sick and their loved ones getting sick, and it was a time when people were not focused on this kind of thing. And then I also need to mention that I have noticed what David Martell talked about, where when I looked at the pictures of what the buildings were supposed to be look like and the streets were supposed to look like, and this even goes back to an ad, I think in June, of the planning people were looking for another hire. And it said, you know, help us plan the future of Williston. And the buildings were 2 and 3 stories high, and it looked all very comfortable. And it's certainly not 87 feet high. So, you know, I'm opposed to the 87-foot high buildings. And I want to reiterate that 90 people have signed our letter opposing that. We're just concerned that that's not what the people of Williston want for our town. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on Zoom?
No one else on Zoom.
So I think we've heard from everybody that wanted to speak tonight, and we'll be ready to close the public hearing and then go into deliberations by the board as to whether or not we will do anything tonight as far as approving it or making other changes. So I'd be looking for a motion to close the hearing.
Actually, I had some more questions for Matt.
Yeah, I would.
Well, we'll be doing that during our deliberations.
Wouldn't that be part of the hearing?
Generally, it's just taking public comment, but you're part of the public, so I guess you could ask questions.
It's a procedural question. Whatever the chair thinks is the right process, that's fine.
I would prefer, at this point, to close the public hearing, go into our deliberations, and we do certainly have questions.
Sure. Then I'd move to close the public hearing on the development bylaws amendment.
So is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion to close the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, now we are into deliberations on the form-based code, and we're asked Matt to join us, and we have a few questions, I'm sure.
All right, I'll start.
I'll start, sure. Couple just clarification points that I just wanted to ask about. So, you know, wherever everybody's talking about the maximum height of 87 feet, that includes obviously the roof. What is the actual, with a 5-story building, what is the actual height of the building itself that's allowable, regardless of the roof?
Yeah, so the maximum height to the top plate, the top of that 5th story is 64 feet.
Okay. So then the 87 feet is assuming that they build on from there almost extra 20, whatever. Oh my gosh, my math is really terrible. 23-foot pitched roof.
Yeah, so we imagined a building 70 feet deep with a 12-12 pitch roof going all the way up to a peak, and that would fit under the 87-foot limit.
Right, okay.
If somebody were to do that.
Okay. And then currently, what, you know, I guess the new hotel is the largest building that we have being developed in town, is that correct?
So we measured that at
size.
48.
Yeah.
I think we have a few in Finney that are closer to 52.
Okay.
You know, depending on how you look at them, but to the peak of that roof in both cases.
At 52, okay. All right. And then, you know, a lot of folks, and maybe you don't have the answers, but have questions about what is determined as affordable housing in town, or not in town, but in state and national levels. And so if you could just review what is considered affordable housing, and then also the difference between affordable and low income, if you could briefly.
Sure. So first off, housing that's affordable is housing that a given household can afford, spending no more than 30% of its income on that housing. In the case of a rental, on rent and utilities. In the case of an ownership unit, on mortgage, taxes, and insurance. So you take your household income. Are you spending 30%? Are you spending less than 30%? Are you spending more than 30% on your housing? So then when we define affordable housing in the zoning bylaw, which is a definition that stays under the draft form-based code, we look at two different levels. We look at affordable to a family making 100% of the median income, and we look at a family making 80% of the median income, or rather a household making income at those two levels. We use the Burlington, South Burlington Metropolitan Statistical Area as our area that we draw our median income from. That's a larger region that includes Williston, Burlington, South Burlington, up into the Champlain Islands a little bit. And we use numbers that are provided by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. So I had occasion to look these numbers up today, or actually just a few days ago, but they probably haven't changed. A two-person household making that median income makes $85,812. A three-person household makes $95,562. Those are the numbers that have been collected as of the most recent quarter. So if we look at that in terms of a rental, a three-person household could spend no more than about $2,400 a month on their housing without exceeding that 30% limit. So either on their rent and utilities or on their mortgage, taxes, and insurance. So, you know, and you heard somebody quote sort of a calculation, how do you turn that into a purchase price for a home? That's exactly what we do when we deal with perpetually affordable housing that's ownership. We require a deed restriction to be placed on it. And we require the minimum, or rather maximum sale price to be verified every time that unit turns over. We have about a half dozen units that we manage through zoning enforcement under that system. Last I looked, the interest rates were quite a bit lower, and that house price limit for a three-bedroom home was over $450,000. And the rental limits were similar to what they are now, about $2,000 for a one-bedroom, about $2,200 for a two-bedroom. So when somebody in our current system promises perpetually affordable housing at 100% of the area median income, as a part of their proposal for a development, they identify which units will be price restricted in that way, and they are audited periodically by me as zoning administrator or one of my staff. Usually once a year we say, please give me your rental amounts for the affordable units you promised, and we check it against the HUD numbers. In the case of ownership, there's a requirement that the zoning administrator issue a certificate of compliance every time that ownership unit turns over that verifies that the new sale price is still in keeping with the median price for affordability. So I said we look at 100% median. We also look at a lower level, 80% median. 80% and below is where that lower income generally starts. We incentivize things that are affordable at 80% median or below more than we incentivize things that are at 100% median or below. And it plays into the town's growth management system, something we haven't really talked about tonight, but is proposed to currently remain in place through any adoption of the form-based code. So keeping in mind, in the Taft Corners area, both within and without the form-based code area, the town's growth management system, on average, allows for the creation of 50 dwelling unit equivalents per year, balanced with 37 at market rate and 13 that can only be built if they're affordable at 100% median or below. We look at a 10-year horizon. Some years you might have 50 out of 50 build. Some years you might have more than that. Some years you might have less. But over that 10-year stretch, it's going to average to about 50 dwelling unit equivalents per year, remembering that a 1-bedroom or studio is 1/2 of a dwelling unit equivalent. A 2-bedroom or larger is 1 dwelling unit equivalent. Those limits, which are really underpinned by the town's major constraints it faces in terms of sewer capacity, would remain in place under the form-based code proposal.
What is the maximum, just the maximum number of units that are allowed to be built per year again, you said?
50 dwelling unit equivalents per year in the Taft Corners area in the growth center. And remembering that at this point, the boundaries of the form-based code area are within that. So we have units both within and without the growth center that would play into that same limit.
Okay. Thank you.
So if we could get back to building height, our favorite subject.
Sure.
Matt, one of the things I found very helpful for me was the memo you put together in July, where you talked about the various aspects the select board was going to talk, considering, including building heights. And I'm just hoping you can explain how building heights will work in the Taft Corner form-based code area. Because as I look at this, I understand there are various districts, and the various districts have different building heights. In fact, two districts have the 5-story, one district has a 4-story, and one district has a 3-story. You also pointed out in it that in at least one of those districts, the building height will actually be less than is currently allowed. So I think there's some explaining that needs to go on, if you will, about how the various districts are set up and how that, whatever the right word is, matches the building heights that are associated with that district. And what is that intended to do?
Sure.
Does that make sense?
I can try to tease it apart.
Okay.
So what we're dealing with under our current zoning in I think all, if not 99% of the Taft Corner zoning districts that are inside the growth center, we have a maximum allowed height of 52 feet if the building provides either structured parking, meaning parking underneath the building, or a certain percentage of its dwelling units as affordable. It's 30% usually. So you can build a 52-foot high building down in Blair Park where the 4-story hotel is being built. You can build a 52-foot high building sort of a stone's throw from the fire station at the edge of what we call the LaPierre property. You can build a 52-foot building in the middle of town at Finney Crossing. If you do structured parking or affordable. And, we find generally most of those multi-story buildings are going to park underneath because it just starts to make sense to do that. So the form-based code is an attempt to take a more nuanced approach to where allowable heights and building bulk happens, and I'll get back to that. If you were to look at a map of the form-based code area, all of the street frontages, which is how you decide what building height you're allowed to build, you look at the color of the street on the map that building would be on, all of the yellow, which we call the strollable neighborhood, is adjacent to the boundary of the growth center to the residential zoning district. In other words, closest to the lower intensity single-use zoning district that Taft Corners district or Taft Corners Growth Center butts up against. In those districts, you have that 3-story limit, and that's part of it, but you also have a 7,000 square foot building footprint limit, which is half the size, less than half the size of the 20,000 square foot footprint limit that you see throughout the rest. And there are a couple of other dimensional standards like maximum building width and building depth that come into play there as well. It's the lower intensity, smaller, generally row home friendly district within the form-based code. You won't be able to build a 52-foot building that's at its full bulk like the 52-foot buildings you have today in those districts. You will be able to build a 3-story building with a maximum height at the top plate of 43 feet, and you can put a pitched roof on it, and some piece of that pitched roof volume may exceed 52 feet. But it'll be the pointy part above the 52-foot limit. So the size, the bulk, the depth, the width, and the shape, and to some degree the height of what kind of building is allowed in that district is changing significantly. And then that same sort of nuance plays out throughout the other districts. So somebody tonight mentioned, if you've ever gotten an email from me in the last 2 years, there's a picture with these buildings from the form-based code area rendered in my signature line, and it says, "Help us plan the future of Taft Corners." It's a rendering of Trader Lane, a road that the town might make an effort to build someday. And Trader Lane is that next step up. It's not the 5-story, it's the 4-story area. It's imagined as being a little lower intensity than some of the other places because there's an opportunity to do something quite continuous along it and really make it a pleasant residential street with a lot of access to green space. So there, 4 stories, again, pitched roof on top. You'd never make it to 87 feet there, even with the 14/12 roof pitch we allow, so be it. Then we have our taller areas that do allow the 5 stories with the attic story on top, where a relatively steep pitched roof might actually make it to that 87-foot limit. Am I getting close to answering your question?
Yeah, one thing that might help is explaining where are the areas where the tallest buildings could go, you know, the 5-story now limited to the 87 feet, and where are the areas where buildings aren't allowed to be 5-story? They could either be 4 or 3 stories, but not more.
Sure. So we gave you guys a nice shiny updated map. It has the red, yellow, and orange colors on it. This shows the boundary changes the select board requested. And I'm going to try to refer to it in a way that I can just describe it in words, but I do need to look at it while I talk about this. So starting closest to the Mahan Farm property, the cornfield across from the fire station, when you cross out of that property over the tributary to the Allen Brook, you're approaching Cottonwood. First, you see that 3-story area in the outer street around what we call the LaPierre property. And then in the back of the property, you see what we would have as light orange, the transitional neighborhood. That's the 4-story area. Along Route 2 and within the Cottonwood project itself, you see the dark orange, and that's the town center designation where you could do 5 stories. So you have 5 stories along the Route 2 and 2A corridors in general, and sort of wrapping their corners as they go into places like 2 in Talcott, 2 in Zephyr, 2 in Holland at L.O. Bean and Healthy Living, et cetera. Then if you look around up, you do that up Route 2A, and then if you were to turn to your right going northbound on 2A, you drop back down as you come in on Alpine Drive, or sorry, not Alpine Drive now, on Zephyr Road or Night Lane. You start with the 5-story zone, you drop to the 4, and then you drop down to the 3 as you go out into the outer parts of Finney Crossing. Similarly, you start with the 5-story along Route 2A, you drop to 4 around half of Blair Park. Some of the rest of Blair Park is in that 5-story town center configuration. Looking down into Taft Corners Park, most of Taft Corners Park allows the 5-story configuration. Part of the wisdom here was that we're going down slope into a lower lying area, in an area where there might be some significant redevelopment. But as I mentioned, if you look along Trader Lane and around that long rectangular green, you see the light orange. We're back to transitional neighborhood at 4 stories there. Most of Maple Tree Place, built out as it is, 5 stories, town center. Again, dropping lower as you come back out to Cottonwood.
Okay. My next question is, it may be more of a statement than it is a question, which is, one of the stated goals, I shouldn't say stated goals, one of the benefits of allowing taller buildings is the goal of making apartments more affordable, housing more affordable. Mm-hmm. I'm really questioning whether that's enough of a incentive to drive the market to doing that. So my question is along the lines of, does Williston, if Williston wants to create more affordable housing,
does more need to be done in addition to what the Taft's Corner form-based code allows? In other words, do we, meaning the town of Williston, need to adopt more, I don't know what the right word is, forceful isn't what I'm looking for. Unfortunately, it's all that comes to mind, but stronger, that have more definitive requirements, not incentives, but maybe requirements. Is that what is needed to really change how much affordable housing Williston is developing into the future?
I think there is a question.
Developers in Williston are creating into the future.
I think there is a question in there, and I can try to answer it.
Can squeeze it out.
Yes, more can be done in Williston zoning to facilitate and encourage the creation of affordable housing. The form-based code sets the stage for a built form that's likely to accommodate affordable housing in a way that makes it worth somebody's while to build. Somebody once famously said, if you go to Home Depot and ask where the affordable 2x4s are, you'll be pointed to the exact same 2x4s that are used to build the market rate housing. There are fixed costs to creating housing. There are economies of scale that come with density. There are more things that can be done in zoning. Chapin Kaner testified before you tonight about the Planning Commission's upcoming work on inclusionary zoning and considering that some level of affordable units at some percentage be required in some projects of a certain size. And this is a tool that is used throughout the county, region, and country. But I would go further than that and say to truly get the amount of affordable housing that's needed, it probably can't all be accomplished in zoning. It will be accomplished at Williston's level by a combination of zoning, investment in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, careful planning for possibly the acquisition and use of town lands for affordable housing, continuing to implement policies like impact fee relief for affordable projects, just a whole array of things. It's a complicated problem. It requires a multifaceted solution. It requires the town working in partnership with the state and federal government, with the nonprofit sector, and with the private sector, and really taking on some skill levels and capacities that we don't have all of right now. As I sort of have said to a lot of folks about the form-based code, this sets the stage. Inclusionary zoning could come in behind this and add a metric to get something. Growth management does something right now. There are 13 units a year that are only going to get built if they're permanently restricted at 100% median affordable or below. If they cannot be, they will not be built. You'll build 37 units a year. We have that policy today. We're keeping that policy. But I watch where projects are happening in my backyard in City Center, South Burlington, and they're happening partially because of that community's form-based code, but they're also happening because of partnerships between the city and the nonprofit and public and private sector. And they're happening because of investments and tax increment financing and other tools that Williston has not yet taken on to make those things happen.
Okay. My last question is, we've heard several folks tonight ask us to slow down, to stop, put a halt, until we can achieve various different things. So my question is, I think I understand what the benefits that could be. Maybe I don't. But I'm not sure I understand what the liabilities of doing that would be. Is there something we need as we're making a decision whether we should vote or not, or how to vote? Are there liabilities we should know about that a delay would cause? For instance, do we have to go into another 180-day sort of period of, how you have to do things to adopt this ordinance?
So there's a few things.
Okay.
One is there's that 150-day period that started on the July 5th hearing that goes away in the first or second week of November, and then the old zoning remains in effect. The new zoning is no longer administered as if it's in effect. And so as this process lengthens, the possibility that more development is proposed in Taft Corners under the old and existing zoning and becomes vested in approvals based on that zoning, that will happen. People are proposing development all the time in Williston. We're processing applications for it all the time. And there will be places that will be developed in ways that, you know, are not compatible with this plan. So to the extent that you see merit in this plan, its effectiveness is reduced as somebody develops on a planned green space, or somebody puts a single-story sort of low-value building in a place that this plan thought something really quite dense could go. There's a risk to that. There's probably a greater risk that we are moving further and further away from all of that public process I talked about. And, you know, I'll just call back to a couple of things because building height is such a hot topic. You know, I came to this board in early January as the Planning Commission was beginning to work on its coding. And I wrote you a memo. I said, here's everything that's going to be controversial about this code. Here's everything that's going to really challenge you as decision makers. Building height was certainly one of those items. I can go back to July of 2021 and the production of the vision plan and all of the work the Planning Commission put into that. All the struggle that went into that document included points where we'd get to a point we'd say, well, this is a real issue. We need to talk about it, but we need to put it somewhere in the plan and move on. And there's a section of that vision plan called overarching issues, and one of them is building height. And it talks about the understanding the community is coming to that there's a relationship between building height and affordability. There's a relationship between building height and density, building height, density, and energy efficiency, building height, density, and transportation energy efficiency and climate, et cetera. And taller buildings are hard to grapple with, but there are some things they do that are seen as positives and seen as goals in the town plan. In addition to the creation of an urban village for Taft Corners Center and a walkable place as, you know, expressed in longstanding desires by the town. So there's a struggle that's been going on for some time. We even I and the staff, in the thick of this and in preparing for the present moment, tend to have our memories get a little fuzzy about how much we put into that. And all those conversations we had with people, and all those compromises we had, all those debates we had with the Planning Commission. And there is a danger, if things go much longer, of really having somebody say, let's just start over. And I don't think, I know the Planning Commission doesn't have the capacity to do it again. They've told me as much. They've all said I have to promise that I'll never make them work this hard again, and I have. And so the liabilities maybe are not especially tangible. Somebody might develop something under the old code. More so, there's some momentum that might be lost. The other part is there is a really fundamentally different framework embedded in this code. We're starting from the public realm. We're starting from the green spaces. We're starting from the streets. We're starting from the understanding that those municipal facilities will form the bedrock of a new type of community where those resources are shared, and where that community is supported by and enhanced by the private development that comes out and faces it in the form of buildings that meet this code. That's a really fundamentally different framework than saying, how many acres do you have, and I'll tell you how many apartments you can build. It's really, really different. And that's the Lego set. As I said to the Planning Commission more than a year ago, buy the Lego set. You can build what's on the box. You can build something else. But if you don't have the framework, you don't have that ability to build that public realm that this plan calls for.
You mentioned second week in November. What was that in relationship to?
It's 150 days from the July 5th hearing.
Okay, and what happens after that?
After that, we would no longer administer this code as if it has been adopted. So in other words, we've been in that zoning vortex where both the existing zoning and the proposed zoning are in effect. That essentially puts a pause on the submission of new development plans for the code area until either the new one is adopted and the old is repealed, or we go past 150 days and the new one is just an idea again.
Okay. And will it take another 150 days?
Um,
To do whatever we do with,
It may not.
It may not, okay.
You know, I think at this point, if you were considering something based on public testimony, you'd probably be telling me to knock a story or two out of these height limits. It's a substantive change. It requires the warning of a new public hearing if you do that. If you change any dimensional thing in this, you've got to warn a new public hearing. We'd have to go out at least about a month to do that.
okay,
That's the time liability right now.
okay, good. All right, thank you.
Ted?
So, Matt, just want to cover a couple things, try to be quick. The growth management system that the town has in place, and just let's focus on the one that governs Taft Corners. That is a management system that takes into account sewer capacity, is that part of it? Educational capacity of the schools? And other infrastructure things?
Yes.
Okay. And that limits the number of new housing equivalents, or whatever the term is, to 50.
Yes.
All right. Okay, let's put that on the back burner. And then the other thing is, I heard somebody say that there's no requirement for open land. That's, maps that I saw and showed a number of spaces that had to be for open land, for parks, et cetera, things like that, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And in fact, as I recall, that's one of the things that the developers didn't like about it. They're saying, you know, why is there a park in my middle of my field?
Sure.
I didn't put it there. Okay. So taking into account the growth management system and the fact that in a lot of these areas that are on the map will not have 5-story buildings allowed in it. One of the things that was posted earlier today was that there would be 100 apartment buildings. They're planned to build around 100 apartment buildings. Is that reasonable to think that there are going to be 100 apartment buildings in this area of town?
Maybe in 50 to 70 years. So I based that answer to that question on just counting the rooftops in some of the visualizations that were prepared during the vision plan, imagining a maximum build out. We set that date at 2070 in that graphic. And it's a little bit of a guess, but envisioning sort of every space that's not planned for a park, with every single brand new street being built, probably $40 million worth of, you know, private investment here, and some parking lots being infilled over top of, which is feasible sometimes, but not others due to long-term leases, et cetera. That's about 100 buildings of some kind. Not all 5-story. I go back to the map. Some of those on the vision plan are in places that aren't allowed to build a 5-story configuration. But yeah, there's about 100 reasonable size apartment buildings in the vision plan at full build out, that 2070 scenario.
Okay, so that's 48 years. Okay, but that would be limited by the growth management system that has 50 units coming online every year.
Correct.
And would each of these buildings have 60 apartments in them?
No, they would vary.
Okay. Why would they vary?
Well, when you look at what's allowed to be built, so in our most intense zone, one of the things to remember is we have a maximum width and a maximum depth, 80 by 180. Runs you about 14,000 square feet, if I'm remembering my math in my head right. So then you stack up your stories. We figure about 1,000 square feet per unit. At that footprint size, you pretty much have to get into the 5 stories, or maybe 5 stories plus a little bit of that attic story to see 60 to 70 units. But that's not feasible on every site. First off, it's not allowed in every form area. Second off, when we've looked at actual sites in Williston and imagined placing the maximum footprint building on that site, accommodating minimum open area, which is a requirement in the code, accommodating surface parking, and also putting some parking under the building. We run out of parking, frankly, before we run out of building height, to the tune of a story or two lower than the maximum allowed. It is very likely that it will be a fairly rare site right now in Williston without building some really significant infrastructure or parking 2 levels below ground that you can get that 5-story or 5-story plus 1 attic story building in. Our parking minimums for residential are still generally working out to 2 spaces per unit. For 2-bedroom units, 1.75 spaces per unit for one 1-bedroom unit. That's still a pretty high minimum. You can't fit it all under the building. You've got to use some of your site for it. You've got to put 15% of your site into private open area. Some of that you can put into balconies and rooftop gardens. Sometimes you can't. You've got to find it on the ground. So you start doing that with a site, and I like transit as much as everybody, but we're not quite to the point of building buildings or building apartments that come with no parking in Williston yet. Maybe we are someday. Maybe this plan anticipates that toward the end of that 50-year cycle, but there's headroom in there that would require significant changes in either infrastructure, growth management, or the way we transport ourselves to be achieved.
And then, you know, one of the things that the tenor of some of the concerns that would concern me too, if I thought this, is that there is a plan, that there is like Finney Crossing was a planned development, or Cottonwood is a planned development, or Southridge was planned. Have developers come forward, and is there somebody asking to create a plan to build 100 apartment buildings all at once in Williston?
No. This is zoning. Williston has zoning today. We talked a lot when we were developing the vision plan and thinking about some of the things that were kind of pushing people's conceptions about Taft Corners, that if you drew the maximum picture of what could be built under today's zoning and called it a plan, I think it would be quite controversial. Just based on the development standards we have today. We're like any other municipality. We do our best to come up with rules that are fair and constitutional and can be administrated and reflect the goals of the municipal plan. But lots of different things can be built under various zoning regimes. And I often wished I had spent a little bit of consultant money having somebody draw Taft Corners built to the maximum allowed under the current zoning. And the difference is the buildings get wider. They stay shorter, they get wider. And that was one of those things we had a lot of people react to when we asked for opinions about what should change about the development standards in Taft Corners.
And my last question would be kind of nail that home, and that I know you would not comment on the aesthetics of a building, but I've heard from people that they don't particularly like the Blair Park Hotel. Could another Blair Park Hotel type building be built under the current zoning if we didn't adopt the new bylaws?
Yeah, you know, it's 4 stories because it has parking underneath. It's pulled up to the street because the zoning wants buildings to be pulled up to the street. That's true in most of Taft Corners. It contains a use, hospitality, that's allowed throughout the zoning districts of the growth center. It has a pitched roof on top, albeit a relatively flat one, you know, and it was approved under Williston's zoning by a public hearing in front of the DRB with a full staff report. We certainly had some finer points we debated about that building and what would make it compliant, but it was approved under a set of zoning rules virtually identical to the ones that exist in Taft Corners today.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gordon?
So I've got a lot of feedback from town residents on this, and I think first and foremost, most of them started their emails with thanking the Planning Commission and yourself for the guidance that given the town and all the hours that have gone into this and your knowledge of what you do on a daily basis. So I wanted to premise that first. I think it was brought up tonight as well, but a couple of folks have asked the question around, like, how would you answer residents who raised that concern that they were preoccupied with the global pandemic rather than the proposed zoning change at Taft Corners? And if there was, if any, lack of public input during that time period because they were obviously preoccupied with other things. I know you gave data statistics earlier tonight, but how would you, I guess, answer those folks that feel like maybe that wasn't their biggest concern at the time over the past year and a half or 2 years?
I totally sympathize. We all had to prioritize a lot of things during the pandemic. My office prioritized completely retooling to be able to provide online citizen engagement, not just for this project, but for every single board we served. We made decisions as early as March 20th of 2020 that we had to continue to serve the business of the boards that we were assigned to staff, and that we had to find a way to do that that would allow people to participate online. And to my staff's credit, we went out and did it. There's probably some online meetings in my community that I didn't go to because my job got more demanding, because my kids' school got more demanding, because my life got more demanding because of the pandemic. All I can say is I'm very confident in saying that I, my staff, and the Planning Commission, the consultant team, did our very best to provide many, many different ways for people to participate, whether it was attending an online meeting, filling out a survey, sending in an email, having a meeting or a phone call with a staff member, responding to a mailing, et cetera. And, you know, we all had to make some decisions about what moved forward and what didn't when the pandemic hit. This was a project that we had planned for in 2019. We had our consultant lined up, or rather we had our funding lined up. We had consultants that we quizzed extensively on, can you do online engagement? Will it work? Can you show us that you'll do it? We had all of that in mind when we did this. And, you know, this is one of many, many decisions that Willistonians and people across the state and country had to make in that pandemic. So I thoroughly respect that if somebody says, you know, this just fell off my list and I wish I hadn't, you know, I wish I'd had time for it and I'm sorry I didn't, and I'd like a chance now. Okay,
yeah,
here we are.
I would be remiss if I didn't represent the public of why I'm sitting here meeting after meeting, so that's just not from me, that's from residents. Jeff, you stole my second question, so you know. Third question that I had, or not I had, residents had, well, most residents would support a lot of the aspects of the form-based code. How do we as a board adopt this new zoning with the building height as the major concern that's been kicked around the table tonight? Because I think there's a lot of misconception out there from the public on what maybe they have interpreted either from the town or other people in conversation, or just what they think what this will look like. Because I know when you look at, you know, this, you're sitting here and we're sitting here tonight and you do a great job explaining it, but for a lot of folks that just look at something on a graphic and talk about 3-story, 4-story, 5-story, with an attic, without, pitched roof or not, sometimes I think that can be hard for them to comprehend. And I think the public would want to know, like, why would we move all of this forward if we can't seem to figure out that one aspect? And I know we can go back and amend. I've been doing this long enough, so I know we can do that. But if there's that big of an outcry, and from the public emails that I've gotten, that's been the number one, and I think we would all agree sitting around this table that that's the big sticking point here, is what is aesthetically is that going to look like? How do we address that to say it's a good thing? Because I think, I mean, I've read it many times, and I'm impressed with, you know, a set of guidelines that things are going to be followed and things are going to be checked off in a certain way. But I think there's a lot of people out there that are just concerned about you know, you look left, you look right, you can't see over this or that, and how's that gonna look in 20, 30, 50 years? You know, I know, as Ted brought up, this isn't all gonna happen overnight, and we know that. Development's gonna continue to progress. We wanna be mindful of open space and all of these things, but I think the height itself is what's the sticking point for the public. And how do we, I guess, come to an agreement on that before we pass all of this in one shot? Does that make sense? I don't know if I captured that at all, but.
No, I think you did. Height is easy to focus on because it's a number, and it has a lot to do with how far away you can see a building from. If it's taller, you can see it from further away, you know, especially when you're approaching Taft Corners in your car from the top of Old Creamery Road or the Village, coming up the hill from Industrial Ave even. And that's one way to experience building height. Another way to experience it is walking down the street. And I get it, most people in Williston, and probably most people in this room, did not move to Williston to walk down a street. But people in Williston since 1990 have been saying we want a walkable downtown environment in Taft Corners. And that's what that is. So when we did our public outreach and our lead up to the intense design charrette, we had these things called visual preference surveys, which is a really fancy way of showing people some pictures of streets and saying, which do you like and which do you not like? And so if you look back in your vision plan, you'll see pictures that have like red bar, green bar underneath them. And the defining characteristics of what people said they liked versus they didn't like didn't have much to do with the height of the buildings in the background. It had a lot to do with what was happening on the street. Were there street trees? Were there green spaces? Were there places for people to walk? Was it all just cars, et cetera? So the focus was really different. And that's not meant to trick people into saying they like tall buildings. It's meant to bring the experience down to the street level and out of the vehicle, and you're standing there on the sidewalk, and what do you like and not like, because the stated goal was walkable. So I actually don't have a stated goal in the town plan that says make Taft Corners look nice from my car at the top of the hill at Old Creamery Road. But what do we all do when we come down the hill? We look at Taft Corners and we go, wow, you know, especially now with the public safety facility clearing and park and ride clearing, you can see a lot of Taft Corners. And I would be willing to say it's probably not very aesthetically pleasing from that perspective. The opportunity that exists is to infill in there and provide enough development potential, which is part of that height equation, that it'll be worth it for somebody to build that streetscape that people said they liked. And to build that walkable downtown that people in Williston have been saying they wanted since 1990. If somebody is just appalled at the idea of a 5-story or an 87-foot high building in Williston, I don't think that offers any comfort. I just have to agree with you. If you don't like the idea that some part of Taft Corners might look a lot like a city at some point, I don't think I can offer a lot of comfort. That just comes with the territory of making a place a walkable downtown. There's got to be some activity there. There's got to be enough people to kind of make the place go, and there's got to be buildings that are worth building if you're going to ask people to create meaningful places. 5 stories was seen by our public process consultant and planning commission as a meaningful increment beyond what's allowed today without going way beyond, and allowing some flexibility for a diversity of building forms to be created. It is not a plan for every single building in Taft Corners to be 5 stories with an 87-foot high pitched roof on top of it. And, I know it's not a guarantee, but I keep looking at site conditions and keep not finding places where I could get to that height. Somebody might, somebody probably will, but it's not everywhere. And yeah, it is adjustable going forward. That said, this whole code works the same, just does not produce as much housing or as much development with a 4-story maximum or a 3-story maximum. That's up to you as the decision makers, considering everything you've heard and everything you've seen and everything the Planning Commission's worked on, whether that makes sense. There's some threshold where you go small enough and all that nice architectural stuff and those expensive street tree plantings that I want and all that other stuff that's in here, most people may look at it and say, it's just not worth building here. I can't make money in 2 stories. I'm not sure what that threshold is. But there is an acknowledgement in the building height section of that overarching issues part of the vision plan that says, there's a connection between building height, development potential, and the ask of we want these buildings to look nicer, be nicer, have more and bigger windows and doors, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, thank you.
So this touches a little bit on what Gordon says, but I think it would be helpful, obviously, we as the select board have a sense of this, and Chapin mentioned as well about the amendment process. If we, do pass the form-based code and it's at 87 feet and we're like, wow, that was needing to be changed after the fact, what would that process look like?
So that process could either be initiated by the Planning Commission, which is sort of the traditional way to go, or yourselves. And then it's a bylaw amendment process. So you warn a hearing, you hold that hearing. The draft you say you hold a hearing, you say we're gonna drop the building height to 67 feet. That, at the moment you hold that hearing, that becomes effective for 150 days while you consider it. If you adopt it, it's adopted, it becomes the law of the land. Bylaw amendments, zoning bylaw amendments in Williston happen typically about once a year. It's kind of been our track record. Pandemic pushed us off from some of that, but you may recall I was here a year ago talking about impact fee relief for affordable housing projects and parking and wetlands and something else, I can't remember what. We had a whole pile of amendments we were trying to get done that we'd been backlogged on, but it's a common occurrence. I got notifications today that both South Burlington and Richmond are amending their zoning bylaws next month. I get those all the time from our neighboring communities.
So my family and I moved to Williston in 1966. There were probably about 1,200 people in residence in town at that time. Taft Corners had a red and yellow blinking light, just a single unit hanging from the intersection at that time. So here we are 56 years later with about 10,000 people in town. And we've seen multiple changes in the zoning regulations over the course of that period of time. Now we're looking at a long-term plan that will have built into it a timely way to make changes in it as well. And some of the things that the Planning Commission is looking at were outlined in the September 29th memo to us. And I wonder if you just want to talk briefly about the 4 things that are in, 5 things that are in that memo that came to us, because it does talk about boundary changes and affordable housing and heights and things like that.
Sure. So you received this memo from the Planning Commission commenting on modifications that were made to the code as proposed by them. The first point the Planning Commission made, beyond acknowledging the hard look the Select Board had given the form-based code and the complexity of the issues it's addressed, the Planning Commission stated that they understand that the form-based code is a significant departure from the way development has been regulated in the past, and expect that they will be involved in revising it via an expedited process as has been discussed. So being responsive to something that is this new and different is important to the Commission. And you may recall back a few meetings ago, we talked a lot about that in terms of being responsive to regulating plan, map change requests when streets need to be rearranged, as well as in response to needs for affordable housing, et cetera. And I'll get back to that because it's another point on the memo. The Planning Commission agreed with adding the 87-foot height limit, having that maximum, preventing excessively tall buildings while still allowing for flexibility. And, reminder that the attempt at incentivizing pitched roofs was to get some sort of uniquely Williston look, because one of the things Planning Commission observed was a number of communities operating under form-based code had buildings that looked very similar, but none of them had a lot of pitched roofs. That was an idea to get an architectural feature that might actually say to somebody if they were dropped down here, oh, I must be in Williston. The Planning Commission stated about boundary changes, we do not think developer requests should override the effort of Williston. The Planning Commission staff, consultants, and residents have invested in the form-based code. The boundary adjustments removed about 93 acres from the form-based code area and allows those current development patterns under existing zoning to persist in those areas. Planning Commission felt that weakened the form-based code. In addressing affordable housing, and Chapin Kaner mentioned this to you before tonight, the Planning Commission intentionally did not address affordable housing as part of the form-based code project because it's complex. It'll require dedicated time and attention, and the PC wanted to offer the assurance to the Select Board and the community that they're committed to making headway on housing with inclusionary zoning work that has already begun. And just update the Select Board. We have an agreement through the Planning Office for assistance from the Vermont Housing Finance Association to provide us with a housing needs assessment, which under Vermont law is required for a community to have completed and in place prior to considering a zoning bylaw that requires affordable housing as a component of new residential development. That should put us on track to bring a bylaw amendment regarding inclusionary zoning back to the Select Board in the spring, sometime shortly after town meeting. That's the first goal of the Planning Commission, to pick something up that will come on the back and on the heels of the form-based code. Regulating plan and official map. The Planning Commission hopes to continue to revise the regulating plan and the official map, especially as additional wetlands are delineated or desired green spaces are secured through the form-based code process and other development process. And the Planning Commission, again, expects to revise the details on that map in an ongoing basis, knowing that there will need to be flexibility and responsiveness in the revision process, especially as private landowners determine where their constraints are and what their development plans are. So a lot of commitment from the Planning Commission to further amendments, responsiveness, affordable housing, and some statements about why they set the boundaries the way they did versus the way you folks asked to modify them.
Thank you. Any further questions for Matt or comments from the board? So we have some options tonight. We can wait for a motion at another meeting. We could have a motion that's suggested to adopt the plans tonight, or we have an option to suggest other changes. Silence.
It is late. I guess one question I have is, given the Planning Commission's memo dated September 29th, I just want to make sure I understand, if we were to vote, what it is we're voting on. For instance, it talked about the boundary changes. So would the plan we're voting on, if we were to vote tonight, that does not include the 93 acres. In other words, those 93 acres are outside of the form-based code.
That's correct. So moving those boundaries, you leave more land in the mixed-use commercial zone down by Marshall Ave. Prior to this change, all of the Taft Corners zoning district was going to be in the form-based code overlay. Now some will be out. So the map changes. We also, in your bylaw amendments package, reworked various elements of the bylaws to reflect that there's a Taft Corners zoning district again in the code. So there's some text amendments that have to work in. to cover that reality as well. The maps are all revised. The streets map, the official map, and the regulating plan have all been adjusted to reflect those boundary changes.
I guess I'm a little bit confused by the statement, the last sentence under boundary changes. As we work on revisions, we may seek compromises for either or both areas that have been removed. I mean, I understand what it's saying, but it's that concept of we're voting on something and then but under the impression that we'll be working on revisions. I guess I'm trying to wrap my head around that.
Well, in particular as it relates to that mixed-use commercial zone, which for most people, it's the big box zone. You know, it was significantly rewritten 15 years ago along with the entirety of Williston zoning. And really since then, the landowners have had a really hard time coming up with any sort of development they would like to do that meets that zoning. So in some parts of that zoning, it's being covered by the form-based code overlay, and it's anticipating a totally different kind of development, and there's a comfort level with that. There's a recognition by the Planning Commission through this process as they engaged with that Taft Corners Park area that, you know, probably this landowner is going to come to us looking to make adjustments to the zoning that's been around for 15 years because it's not really working very well for them. There's this tension between trying to pull buildings to the street and conventional retailers wanting the parking lot in front. That's one of the major issues in that zoning district. So I take this, and Chapin, you can come up and correct me if I'm missing it. There's an understanding on the part of the Planning Commission that there will be desired revisions outside of the form-based code area as well, and a need to work together with landowners on those. So saying, well, now that it's not going to be in the form-based code area, we know we've got some work to do to achieve the town's goals in this area. The form-based code was one way to solve that part of town. We know we're going to have to revise in a different way to solve that part of town now.
Okay. Let me ask the question, I'm sorry. Let me ask the question slightly differently. Is there value in waiting until those revisions get hashed out before adopting the form-based code, or is there?
No, the two areas are really unrelated at this point. The official map, we took the regulating plan streets and ended them where the form-based code ends, and we just drew dashed lines to show connectivity to the planned streets in that area. So by way of example, it's just all a little fuzzier on the other side of that boundary now.
Okay.
But we just know it's probably more conventional text zoning that looks like the rest of the bylaw that will happen there. Or it might be an applicant-driven process like a specific plan, but we just recognize that something will probably need to happen there if it's not going to be covered by the form-based code.
Okay.
Looking for a motion of some kind.
I'm comfortable making the motion, but Jeff, oftentimes you want more time to think about stuff, so.
That is absolutely true. But getting
As a statement of history?
What's that?
As a statement of history?
As a statement of history. But, and the 2-week rule, we used to call it.
We've had that.
I guess that was my point, I mean, everything from these meetings, I've, met with staff, I've read every email that's come in, Front Porch Forum. This is a case where I'm not sure what the 2 weeks will, or the next meeting will gain us. And that was partly, my questions about what is the significance of that second week in November. Is that really going to gain us anything? And at one point, I did raise the question of should we, put the brakes on, and we didn't. And my point is that was 2 or 3 months ago, and things really haven't changed since that 2 or 3 months. So I'm not sure what would change in a week. It'd give me time to think about things, of course, but I've given this. It's been impossible not to give this a lot of thought already.
So, I'll make the motion, but I'd like to, I'm gonna move that we adopt it, but I'd like to explain why I'm making the motion.
Sure.
First of all, the development is already allowed in this area right now. This isn't like it was always gonna remain the open field across from Walmart forever or something like that. The development is on its way, or at least it will be. The other thing I wanted to touch on is I take exception to the idea that there has not been, that people haven't been heard. I've listened. We've had any number of hearings, and I've paid attention to what people are saying, and I've considered it, and I've weighed it, and I've thought about it. And as I've said a couple of times in different circumstances on the select board, is that I don't enjoy disagreeing with people, because I like it when people like me. I understand that that's not always possible in situations like this. But it's not that I didn't respect the opinions. It's not that I didn't hear them. It's not that I didn't weigh them. It's not that I didn't understand that there are people who are adversely affected by this. I did. But on balance, I think that the form-based code is the way to go. The other thing is that this is, this is not going to inundate the town with 10,000 new citizens overnight. This is not approving a project. This is approving bylaws. This is going to be a 50-year build-out. I may live to 107. I doubt it, but I'm not going to be here when this finally gets completely built out. Hopefully, I'll be here for a good chunk of stuff, but not all of it. But again, scores of buildings are going to be built whether we approve this or not over that same time span. The growth management system, we've spent years talking about sewer capacity, and we continue to do. It seems to be like, it's Jeff's favorite time of the year whenever we do schedule. Attachment A on that.
It's going to be called the Memorial Jeff Fair at some point.
It might. But the growth management thing, it's not some arbitrary and whimsical thing that the select board could say, okay, you know what, we were saying only 50 units a year, and now we're going to change it to 10,000. Ha ha ha. It's a question of physical capacity, and the physical capacity is not there to do more than that, and continue developing every year and giving other developers and other even private citizens who want to hook onto sewer a chance to do that. The sewer is going to be the sewer capacity is going to be the real impediment to growth as everything goes forward, and that's not going to change. The big thing that we've learned recently, I learned recently, I guess it's been around forever, is that it's not so much the plant in Essex that we rent from. It's the capacity of Lake Champlain that's ultimately going to be at capacity to take treated water. And that I don't know what's going to happen with that. But I guess my point is that the growth management system allowing only 50 housing units to come online in this area on each year is not that's almost a law of physics. It's not something that's going to be changed because different select board people come in or people change their minds. And then on balance, I think the aesthetics of it would be a lot better than what we have now. We've been talking about affordable housing stock, but just any housing stock, I think, is a good thing in Vermont right now. And you can't have affordable housing if you don't have any housing. The environmental concerns, I noticed that some of the folks who were opposed to this are very strong environmentalists. I found that kind of ironic that they have environmental concerns, but they also, this will have people living in an area where they are likely going to work, living in an area where they're likely going to shop, where they can go to restaurants, where they can have outdoor activities at parks that are within walking distance. So the environmental concerns, I think, are addressed very strongly with this. And then the last thing I want to say is that I grew up in Vermont, I grew up in Richmond, and went to Richmond Elementary School, and we used to have to stop at recess when the farmer who wanted to get to the back field wanted to get back there, because the teachers were appropriately terrified that some second grader is going to get killed by a tractor on the playground. But the tractor used to go through our playground, and it was right by what we called the cheese factory at the time. We had operational dairy farms in Richmond growing up. You know, when I go for a ride into non-Chittenden County areas of Vermont, I see the place that I grew up. I see windmills, I see fields. If you walk around near Five Tree Hill, you're going to see mysterious stone walls in the middle of the woods, and that's because those were pastures for sheep. And so my point is that the economy changes. That those beautiful windmills that, as I would say, somewhat judgmentally, as the Flatlanders like to come up and vacation and see Vermont under glass and know, isn't this pretty? Those were built so that people could make money. The farmers were making money farming, and that's why they were doing it. And those are not, the economy is changing. And by analogy, someday I think we're going to be looking back saying, hey, remember when there were box stores? I don't think it's going to be in the next 10 years. But if you go to major cities, you're going to see a lot of retail space that is open now. Because the economy has changed. It's changed in a way with online retail, and now the way that we work has changed, where the vast majority of people don't want to go back to the office full time. So I think office space is not going to be what it was. So this has the best chance of providing guidance and the opportunity for people to have, for growth to be in a way that will look to the future, so that we have people living. And they might not go to the office, they might stay in their own apartment, but then they'll be able to go down and buy something at the retail areas immediately under them. There may be offices that were designed it so that there'd be offices there, but I don't think that those offices are going to carry the full weight of things. But my point is that the way people are going to live like this, I think, is going to be the way that society is evolving. So for all of those reasons, I would move to adopt the Unified Development Bylaw Amendment establishing a form-based code overlay district for Taft's Corners and create a townwide official map as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there a discussion on the motion?
I just want to add that I have heard the same, I think, input from the public as Ted has, and I do feel that people have had that opportunity to comment. However, the people that I've heard from have been on the side of building height is a huge concern. And for me, as being representative of the public, it's not my vote, it's their vote that I hear back from, that I'm not comfortable with something that we can put in place now, why we would go back and amend it later when pretty much everyone, that's the concern in the room from what I've heard tonight. So my vote won't be reflective of what I think, it's what I've heard from the folks that's been concerning around building height and the aesthetics that will possibly be down the road. I know those are not definite things, but that's a huge concern out in the public. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you.
I just wanted to commend everybody for showing up and voicing their opinion, whether or not everybody agrees. I love to see our town being involved and taking an interest in what we're doing here. And I think I'm going to steal Jeff's line, but I really hope everybody shows up around budget season too, because all of these decisions affect our daily lives. And this is our town and we want to represent you. So thank you for getting involved.
I'll try to be quick as possible. 2 points I'd like to make before voting. One is, kind of what I had heard about form-based code. I had heard it's a good thing, it's kind of a neat thing, it's progressive, that type of thing, but the more and more I learned about it, the more I became comfortable with it and liked that it was a new way, maybe not new way, a different way, new and different, I guess is correct, way to look at Williston and look at how Taft's Corners should be developed and how that development would best meet the needs of Williston. So from that standpoint, I still feel that way. It's a better way of zoning at the Taft's Corners area, or a more progressive, one that I think does a better job. The other is we've heard many people complain or state their dislike with certain parts of the code. And I guess my point about that is it's not perfect. Thank you, Chapin, for pointing that out. But this is a case where we can't let the perfect get in the way of something that needs to move forward. It's darn good, certainly good enough, in my opinion.
Thank you. So this is a long-term plan that gives opportunity for Williston to grow in an organized way. Also gives Williston a chance to change certain things within the plan. There's an old adage that says if you're in politics and want a friend, get a dog, and I may have to buy a dog tomorrow. Any further discussion on this?
Has there been a second?
Yeah, pardon me?
Has there been a second?
Yeah.
Yes.
I second it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay.
Nay.
So the motion passes 4-1. We're now moving, is there any other business that we haven't taken care of earlier tonight? If not, then we are adjourned. Thank you all for coming.